begins when an earthly king holds the power to imprison invisible forces, forcing both demons and our angels to kneel and declare their names. What brutal secret hides behind the silhouette of an evil god bearing 12 wings, the one who completely manipulates the human mind? And what would happen if heaven actually concealed a dark prison? A place executing cruel sentences, forcing souls rebelling against God to pay a heavy price amidst ice and eternal fire. The familiar book of Genesis always paints the picture of holy angels overflowing with light. Religious circles want the crowd to believe in that beautiful image. But Rome conceals a chilling dark side. They even ordered the burning of all evidence determined to bury the past. However, they failed. 5 forbidden books in today's video will expose a completely contrary truth. They show that angels are also filled with greed, lust, and cruelty exactly like mortals. They stealthily taught humanity how to forge swords and spears, manufacture weapons, and practice dark arts. Furthermore, from wrongful physical relationships, they gave birth to a deformed giant species. These monsters swept everywhere, devouring all things, turning the ancient world into a sea of blood. Tonight, Sleep Codex will reopen the dossier. We will read every single paper page together, stepping straight into the lair of the Watchers. Now close your eyes, relax your body. Just let the sounds of the night pull you deep into the truth. The Book of the Watchers, the origin of the fall. If Genesis chapter 6 leaves us merely a few mysterious sentences regarding the sons of God, mortal women, and Nephilim, then the Book of the Watchers transforms that void into an entire history concerning the origin of evil. This text portion stretches from chapter 1 down to chapter 36 of 1 Enoch. It belongs to the oldest extant Enochic layer. And more importantly, the story was present within the Jewish world multiple centuries prior to the time of Jesus. At Qumran, Aramaic, fragments of 1st Enoch were found within Cave 4. Manuscript 4Q201, usually called the Enoch Scroll, was copied around the year 200 to 150 before Christ. That locates the Watchers tradition very deeply within the Jewish environment of the Second Temple period rather than a myth created by medieval Christianity later on. But if we truly wish to understand this book, we must begin from a thing the majority of videos concerning Enoch ignore. Chapters 6 down to 11 seemingly were formed by weaving 2 different sin traditions into the exact same dossier. Research circles usually call them the Shemihaza tradition and the Azazel tradition, or Azazel, within numerous familiar translations. Siam Biro views the Shemihaza Azazel portion within chapters 6 down to 11 as the oldest core of the fallen angel story within Jewish tradition. Annette Yoshiko Reed additionally emphasizes that the final form of the Book of the Watchers spliced differing initial traditions into a unified narrative concerning fallen angels, forbidden knowledge, and the origin of evil upon the ground. This is exactly the key. The book is investigating 2 things that destroyed the pre-Great Flood world. On one side is the shattering of the creaturely order. On the remaining side is the shattering of the knowledge order. And those 2 paths ultimately converge within the exact same catastrophe. Shemihaza, when 200 Watchers mutually bound themselves into a sin. Chapter 6 brings us to Jared's era. Humanity is multiplying upon the ground. Beautiful daughters appear before the eyes of the sons of heaven. 200 Watchers look down and generate lust. But the text adds a very important detail Genesis has not yet recounted. They desire to beget children. Shemi-Hazah clearly understands the impending action will carry consequences. He even calls it a great sin before any woman has been chosen. His fear focuses upon the possibility other watchers might retreat, leaving him alone, forced to shoulder the responsibility. Therefore, the entire group establishes a shared oath. Each member binds himself via imprecations, so the plan is executed to the very end. Following that oath, the 200 watchers descend upon Mount Hermon. This detail completely alters the nature of the case. The fall began from a conscious decision. Shemi-Hazah recognized the sin, then constructed a mechanism causing the entire group to share the responsibility together. The text additionally divided the watchers under his authority into chiefs of tens, showing the narrator envisioned the descent as a collective organized under command authority. Mount Hermon thence became the location of the rebellious covenant. Right within the story itself, the mountain's name is attached to the oath and imprecations the watchers placed upon themselves. Several studies additionally note the wordplay between Hermon and the concept herem, that which is placed under ban or curse, causing this location to bear a meaning deeper than a geographical coordinate. After Hermon, the transgression proceeded straight into the physical body. The watchers chose women cohabited with them and begot giant hybrid children. The Book of the Watchers develops these creatures from the Nephilim mystery of Genesis chapter 6, yet pushes their consequences to the extreme. Initially, the giants consumed the produce generated by humans. Society's provisioning capability was gradually shattered. When the food source depleted, violence turned straight toward humans themselves. The book continues expanding the devastation to animals, birds, reptiles, and fish, then describes the scene of giant creatures devouring one another's flesh and drinking blood. Here, the Nephilim bear a function larger than the giant image usually seen on thumbnails. They represent a life created outside the order. And that abnormal nature rapidly transforms into a force, consuming everything around itself. The pre-flood world therefore collapsed from within. Food vanished. Violence spread broadly. Blood spilled down to the ground. Reaching the end of the event chain, the ground itself is described as raising its voice to accuse those who had defiled it. But this is merely half the dossier, because within those very same chapters, another character gradually occupies the central position. Azazel, and his sin is dangerous according to an entirely different manner. Azazel, when heavenly knowledge was brought into human hands. Chapter 8 shifts focus from physical relations to teaching. Azazel transmitted to humans how to manufacture swords, knives, shields, and armor. That equates to an alteration bearing systematic nature. Metal could now be processed into tools of war. The human body could be protected using armor, while another's body could be pierced by a sword blade. Alongside metallurgy, Azazel is additionally linked with jewelry, precious stones, beautification techniques, and body adornment. Other watchers continued transmitting magic botanical knowledge regarding plant roots, observing constellations, meteorological phenomena, the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon's movements. The list within Chapter 8 therefore resembles an inventory of ancient civilizational knowledge branches rather than a simple magic list. This is likewise where the true content of the Book of the Watchers becomes deeper than the angels lusting after women story. The book does not view all knowledge concerning heaven and earth as an evil thing. Enoch later will be permitted by the heavenly realm itself to access cosmic secrets. He learns concerning the world's structure, the paths of celestial bodies, the dwelling places of souls and judgment zones. The difference lies within the right to reveal knowledge. The Watchers arbitrarily took things belonging to the heavenly realm and transmitted them down according to their own will. Enoch received what the Most High permitted, then recorded it in the capacity of a scribe. Those are two completely opposing knowledge transmission models. Annette Yoshiko Reed views precisely this opposition as a key to the Book of the Watchers. The fall is linked with illicit angelic instruction, meaning angels revealing knowledge exceeding their authority, whereas Enoch represents the authorized and controlled revelation form. This point becomes clearer in chapter 16. When God pronounces the sentence upon the watchers, he states that they were once in heaven and accessed mysteries. Yet they brought those secrets to transmit to women and men, causing evil to increase upon the earth. Therefore, Azazel was not simply an angel teaching humans to forge swords. If viewed according to historical depth, what he transmitted was not a new invention, but resembled reactivating bodies of knowledge, inherently existing since humanity's origin, since the era of Adam and Eve, when humans still lived within direct proximity to the divine. Within that ancient memory, crafts such as metal casting weapon, forging, or armor manufacturing were not the creation of any single era, but were part of a primordial knowledge vault once bestowed down as a grace. Similarly, other watchers did not merely teach magic in the occult sense, but additionally transmitted understandings concerning celestial cycles, star movements, how to read the sky, and predicting weather foundations that later became early astrology and astronomy. Within the storytelling style of the Book of the Watchers, these bodies of knowledge were not late human inventions, but were remnants of an ancient understanding system once belonging to the divine order, inherently bestowed upon humanity from the beginning, yet gradually forgotten or obscured over time. Viewed according to this manner, Azazel and the Watchers did not merely ruin the world by handing over power, but additionally exposed a more terrifying thing. Humanity was re-accessing knowledge systems, inherently once bestowed from the primordial beginning, yet now distorted by the lusts of the transmitters and the arrogance of the receivers. Forging, metallurgy, astronomical observation, ritual practice all appear as fragments of an ancient understanding foundation, once bearing a sacred nature. Yet, when separated from its divine origin, they are no longer pure grace, but become tools, causing humans to gradually elevate themselves, forgetting dependence upon the divine and losing the reverence inherently the foundation of the initial order. Weapons and magic are therefore placed side by side within the same indictment, as if they were the exact same type of violation. The book views them beneath a shared principle. Humans did not merely receive tools to impact the world more strongly, but additionally accessed knowledge layers inherently belonging to a different order, while the moral foundation and social structure had not yet adapted to them. This is likewise the reason chapter 9, when faithful angels present the case to God, calls Azazel by his personal name. The accusation states he revealed eternal secrets inherently preserved in heaven. Shemi-Hazah is mentioned in the capacity of the one holding authority over his associates. Thus, right within the indictment, the two branches of the story remain clearly visible. Shemi-Hazah bears responsibility for the union generating the giant's generation. Azazel bears responsibility for the dissemination of secrets, increasing destructive power upon the ground. That is the reason numerous scholars argue chapters 6 down to 11 preserve traces of two traditions that once possessed separate lives, then were combined by the editor. One tradition explains evil via the mixture between angels and humans. The remaining tradition explains corruption via illicitly revealed knowledge. The final form of the Book of the Watchers merged two causes into the exact same history, rendering the rebellion simultaneously biological and civilizational. Chapters 9 and 10. The heavenly realm separates each criminal charge. Reaching chapter 9. The cry of the dead has ascended to heaven. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and another archangel named, according to varying manuscript traditions, see the scene of blood spilling across the earth, then present the case before the Most High. The noteworthy thing lies within how the subsequent sentence is divided. Azazel is handed over to Raphael. He must be bound hand and foot, cast into Dudael, covered with rocks, and kept within darkness to await the day of judgment. Right following this order, the text places especially heavy responsibility upon him when declaring that the corruption of the earth is tied to the works Azazel taught. Meanwhile, Gabriel is assigned the mission to handle the hybrid generation, the Nephilim born from the union between the Watchers and humanity. Instead of annihilating them directly, he is ordered to cause them to turn and slaughter one another. So the violence inherently residing within their nature becomes a self-destructive tool. This generation's collapse does not occur like a purge from the outside, but like an internal self-disintegration process when the giant creatures themselves become enemies of one another. Michael conversely receives a more structural mission dealing with Shemihaza and the entire Watchers group that participated in the oath upon Hermon. They are not annihilated immediately, but bound and imprisoned within a waiting state across multiple generations, like a suspension of existence, prolonging until the final day of judgment. This is a punishment form emphasizing the stripping away of the right to intervene into the world, rather than merely pure destruction. In parallel with that, Noah is warned concerning the impending disaster. This warning does not merely aim to save an individual, but aims to ensure the continuation of the human lineage after the old world is purified. Noah becomes the sole biological anchor between a collapsing order and a new order not yet formed. Azazel, meanwhile, is neutralized according to a different logic. His sin does not lie within acts directly causing violence, but within disseminating knowledge. Metallurgical techniques, weapon manufacturing, and adornment forms altering how humans impact the world. Precisely because of that, the punishment reserved for him bears an influence eliminating nature being bound, cast into a desolate place, and completely covered, so what he transmitted no longer possesses the capability to continue spreading. The Nephilim, after losing the balance between two origins, heavenly and mortal, do not die peacefully. The violent nature inherently implanted within them since birth causes them to turn and destroy one another. Their collapse, therefore, is not a singular punishing act, but the inevitable result of a survival structure skewed from the initial order. Ultimately, Shemihaza and the accomplice angels are completely stripped of the capability to return to their former positions within the heavenly order. The fact they once voluntarily abandoned their status to participate in the oath upon Hermon becomes an irreversible point. They are no longer viewed as entities capable of being restored, but as individuals who permanently severed the connection with the realm they once belonged to. The Great Flood appears within this system as the step purifying consequences upon the ground, while the Watcher's sentence extends vastly further than the Flood. This is a very important point. The Flood kills the giants. The Flood has not yet resolved the entire problem, and chapter 15 explains the reason. The Nephilim die, yet demons appear. This is perhaps the most important portion of the entire Book of the Watchers regarding demonology history. Enoch receives the explanation that the giants were born from two different existence types. The origin of their fathers belongs to the spirit world. The origin of their mothers belongs to flesh. When that hybrid body dies, the spirit portion continues existing upon the earth. Chapter 15 calls them evil spirits. The text describes them continuing to oppress, attack, battle, destroy, and cause humans misery. This is an extremely large theological developmental step. Within the Book of the Watchers, the demon world is not yet explained simply by the fallen angels are precisely the demons. Destiny is divided into two branches. The Watchers endure imprisonment and await trial. The spirits arising from the corpses of the giants instead become the evil spirit force wandering upon the ground. A study within the Journal of Theological Studies emphasizes exactly this distinction. The Watchers are imprisoned and lose direct operational capability, whereas the giant spirits continue harassing humanity, generating an Enochic explanation for the prolonged presence of demonic evil following the Great Flood era. Annette Yoshiko Reed additionally calls the Book of the Watchers the earliest known example concerning a Jewish demonology system deployed so broadly. This detail will become extremely important when we reach the Testament of Solomon. Because multiple centuries later, Solomon will ask each individual demon what its name is, how it causes illness or disaster, and which angel can suppress it. Yet before Solomon, the Book of the Watchers had already established a foundational explanation. The invisible world filled with hostile entities can be traced back to the pre-flood catastrophe. Enoch, the one permitted to access what the Watchers stole. From chapter 12, the character Enoch finally steps into the story's center. And this is precisely the portion causing the book's structure to become truly subtle. The Watchers awaiting judgment seek out a human to ask for help. Enoch is called the scribe of righteousness. They request him to write a petition begging forgiveness, then present it to God. The position between the two sides has completely reversed. Entities once belonging to the heavenly realm now need a human standing between them and God. Enoch writes the petition, then goes to the Dan region near Hermon, reads the supplication, and falls asleep. Within the subsequent vision, he is brought up to where the great glory's throne is to hear the sentence. And here appears one of the sharpest sentences of the entire book. You should intercede for men, and not men for you. The order has been reversed. The Watchers possess higher status than humans, yet they utilize that status to drag humans into disaster. Enoch Immortal is conversely brought up to receive knowledge via the correct path and bring the judgment back down. Annette Yoshiko Reed sees within this structure a very important symmetry. The Watchers descend from heaven down to earth to transmit illicit secrets. Enoch ascends from earth up to heaven to receive authorized revelation. One side seizes knowledge and distributes it according to lust. The other side receives knowledge within a relationship of obedience to God. Therefore, the Book of the Watchers is essentially also a book concerning who possesses the right to know the heavenly realm's secrets and who possesses the right to transmit them to humanity. This is the reason the content concerning weapons, magic, astronomy, and plants is so important. If the message solely revolves around sex, the knowledge-teaching portion in Chapter 8 becomes an out-of-place footnote. But when viewing the entire book through the Revelation issue, everything fits together. The Watchers commit sin via both physical body and knowledge. Enoch is constructed as their opposing image. Why did God not accept the supplication? The answer lies within Chapter 15. The spoken word reminds the Watchers that their nature belongs to heaven. They are spirit beings possessing life, attached to the heavenly realm. Humans bear flesh, beget children, and continue the lineage because their lives are finite. The Watchers took humanity's survival model, then applied it to themselves, creating a generation lying between two existence types. Therefore, their sin within the book's logic is deeper than the act of lust. They disrupted creation's fundamental categorization. Spirit stepped into the reproductive mechanism of flesh. Heaven invaded earth. Secrets of one realm were transferred into another realm. The result of that mixture bore the shape of the giants. Then, after the giants died, consequences continued existing within the shape of evil spirits. Annette Yoshiko Reed notes an especially profound detail. The spoken word within Chapter 15 focuses entirely upon the fact the Watchers abandoned the immortal privilege of heavenly life to pursue the desire to beget children like humans. What they desired was precisely the thing inherently belonging to a different life form. And from here, the entire fall can be understood as a crisis of limits. That limit inherently protected the order between heaven and earth. When it was torn open, consequences spread from the women's families down to the entire civilization. Chapters 17 to 36 Enoch is taken right to the place where the sentence is executed. The final portion of the Book of the Watchers is usually ignored by videos because it seemingly shifts to a lengthy cosmic journey. But placing it after chapters 12 down to 16, the purpose becomes very clear. Enoch has just heard the sentence. Now he is taken to see with his own eyes where that sentence will be executed. He passes through regions attached to fire, darkness, water streams, mountains, and the distant limits of the world. During the journey, stars violating orders appear like entities held back to await judgment. Reaching chapter 21, Enoch sees the place Uriel calls outright the prison of the angels. The rebellious angels are attached to a specific location within the vision's cosmic structure. In another portion, Enoch is shown the place reserved for souls of the dead. He hears Abel continuing to cry, demanding justice after being murdered by Cain. The journey additionally brings him to the tree of life and regions relating to the righteous's reward following judgment. These chapters therefore complete the work the opening section commenced. The Book of the Watchers wishes the reader to see a governed cosmos. Crimes occurring upon the earth possess a dossier in heaven. Victims' blood is heard. Transgressing angels receive sentences. Souls possess a waiting place. Restoration has likewise been prepared within the exact same structure. Enoch becomes a witness because he has seen with his own eyes the places where the judgment will be executed. Exactly that reinforces his authority in the capacity of the revelation bearer. And this is exactly the true focus of the Book of the Watchers. When Genesis chapter 6 recounts concerning sons of God and Nephilim, it leaves behind a series of questions. Who are those entities? In what manner did their sin affect the world? Why did violence prior to the flood increase to a terrifying degree? After the giants died, where did the evil spirit world originate from? And why could a person like Enoch know the secrets of heaven? The Book of the Watchers attempts to answer all those questions using a single system. Shemihaza explains the shattering of order between angels and humanity. Azazel explains the appearance of bodies of knowledge, increasing violence and decadence. Giants explain the physical disaster prior to the flood. Giant spirits explain evil spirits continuing to operate after their physical bodies vanish. While Enoch explains the authorized path for knowledge from heaven to be transmitted down to earth. That is the reason the book is vastly more important than a story concerning 200 fallen angels. It is constructing an ancient theory concerning the origin of evil. And modern research still views this as one of the greatest contributions of the Book of the Watchers towards Second Temple era Jewish thought. Reed especially emphasizes its influence upon the way numerous Jewish communities prior to the rabbinic era read Genesis chapter 6 and thought concerning the origin of evil. Those traditions subsequently additionally entered the environment where the Jesus movement formed. Yet there remains a question the Book of the Watchers leaves open. If these angels were already present near the human world, what was their initial purpose? Why did a group of beings belonging to heaven associate with humanity before the rebellion erupted? Another book returns to precisely that void and provides a more specific answer. It recounts that during Jared's era, the Watchers descended to the ground, bearing the purpose of teaching humanity and executing righteousness. According to that tradition, the tragedy becomes vastly more bitter. The teachers sent down to aid humanity ultimately instead became the source of the corruption they should have prevented. And that is exactly the second dossier we will open. Larachas, the Book of Jubilees, teachers becoming rebels. The final question the Book of the Watchers left behind remains before our eyes. Why did the Watchers descend to the human world right from the beginning? First, Enoch recounts very clearly the moment they saw the women swore an oath upon Mount Hermon, then stepped into rebellion. Yet the curious thing is, if that is truly the beginning, then why do other traditions not begin from the exact same point? Another ancient book forces us to step back an additional step. It brings us back to Jared's era prior even to the union with the daughters of humanity, and posits a hypothesis difficult to ignore. Perhaps the Watchers did not appear as rebels right from the beginning, but as part of an already established order. According to that text, these angels once descended to earth bearing the purpose of guiding humans and establishing judgment alongside uprightness upon the ground. The name of the book is the Book of Jubilees. And before opening the chapter speaking concerning the Watchers, we need to understand why exactly this book became one of the greatest paradoxes of biblical history. A book the West lost, Ethiopia retained. Within Western tradition, the Book of Jubilees is usually classified into the Jewish pseudepigrapha group. It does not reside within the Roman Catholic Bible. Byzantine Orthodox Bible and Protestant Bible. But within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the story is completely different. The official biblical list of the Ethiopian Church places Jubilees within the Old Testament portion right before Enoch. The official page of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church states clearly their biblical set comprises 81 books and lists Jubilee at the 13th position within the Old Testament. The Ethiopian Church itself additionally emphasizes that the Book of Jubilees, or Kufalaot, was preserved fully solely thanks to the Ethiopic tradition. This is not merely a religious declaration, but is additionally confirmed via modern textual evidence. The entirety of the completed Jubilees text remains extant solely within the Ge'ez tradition, whereas ancient Hebrew and Greek versions remain merely under the form of disjointed fragments found later at Qumran and indirect citation traditions. Its Ge'ez name is Mashafa Kufale, Book of Divisions. This name is not at all random. Studies concerning textual structure, especially within the works of James Vanderkam and Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, show Jubilees is constructed like a tightly theological calendar system, wherein history from creation to Sinai is restructured according to 49-year units Jubilees and 7-year cycles weeks of years. This is an intentional, rewritten Genesis form, aiming to replace the linear storytelling method of the Torah using a time model bearing sacred law nature. Within that system, time is no longer history's random flow, but becomes a law-defined structure: days, weeks, years, Sabbaths, Jubilees. Studies concerning Second Temple Judaism thought point out that this model reflects a highly characteristic concept: the cosmos operates according to an order already prescribed in advance within heavenly tablets, a concept appearing throughout Jubilees and likewise confirmed within Qumran manuscripts. This shows the author is not merely recounting history, but is presenting a cosmological system where laws and time are the direct manifestation of the heavenly order. And this is where the story begins becoming interesting, because for multiple centuries, European scholars knew a work named Little Genesis, or Jubilees, once existed not like a vague legend, but via verifiable quotations within early Christian literature. Church fathers, such as Epiphanius, 4th century, did not merely know of this text, but additionally cited it directly within anti-heretical debates, showing Jubilees once possessed a certain authority level within several early Christian and Jewish communities. Nevertheless, the important thing is, the presence of Jubilees within Greek and Latin sources does not equate to it being preserved continuously within Western tradition. Conversely, manuscript evidence shows this text gradually vanished from the Latin Christian transmission stream, while continuing to be copied and maintained within the Ethiopian tradition. Precisely this interruption, confirmed via transmission history and textual archaeology, caused Jubilees to become a typical case of a lost scripture, solely rediscovered via peripheral traditions and subsequent Qumran discoveries. Yet, the Hebrew version vanished from the Western world. The Greek version was likewise nearly lost. A Latin portion survived within a fragmentary condition. While the entire work continued being copied in Ge'ez in Ethiopia, modern textual research confirms Ge'ez is the sole language preserving the entire 50 chapters of the book. Reaching the early 1840s, a turning point occurred. Missionary Johann Ludwig Krapf had a Ge'ez manuscript copied within the Sawa region of Ethiopia, then sent it to the University Library of Tübingen. The library's currently extant records state the copy was sent February 1st, 1841, and arrived at Tübingen a year later. August Dillmann and afterward researched Ethiopic manuscripts and published the Ge'ez text of Jubilees in the year 1859. In other words, while the majority of the Christian world lived multiple centuries knowing nearly solely the book's name, Ethiopian scribes were still copying it. Precisely that tradition brought the entire work back before the eyes of Western research circles. But the story additionally possesses another twist. Nearly a century later, Qumran was excavated, and within caves near the Dead Sea, people found Jubilees fragments written in Hebrew. A new overview study by James Vanderkam at Oxford records 14 Hebrew copies of Jubilees within the Dead Sea Scrolls. That number causes it to become one of the most attested works outside the Hebrew Bible at Qumran. This discovery resolved a very large problem. The book Ethiopia preserved via Ge'ez truly originated from an ancient Jewish work written in Hebrew. James Vanderkam, one among the scholars dedicating multiple decades researching Jubilees, places the work into the 2nd century before Christ. He describes it like a rewriting of Genesis and the initial portion of Exodus written by an anonymous Jewish author and possessing a specially important position when reconstructing the thought world of Second Temple era Judaism. Matthew Goff even calls First Enoch and Jubilees forgotten scripture. According to him, the Dead Sea Scrolls alongside ancient Christian documents show both once possessed a considerable authority level during ancient times, despite ultimately vanishing from the majority of canons later on. Ethiopia exclusively continued retaining both Enoch and Jubilees within the Old Testament. Therefore, if stating Rome erased Jubilees, historical evidence shows the actual process was more complex than a single book-burning edict. Within the Latin West, the work was gradually eliminated from the recognized canon. A text bearing the name Leptogenesis, Little Genesis, even appeared within the Decretum Galatianum tradition, amidst books viewed as apocryphal. Meanwhile, earlier church fathers still knew and utilized Jubilees. The book gradually lost scribes in the West until the textual tradition was nearly interrupted. Ethiopia selected another path, and precisely thanks to that path, we can open chapter 4 today. Because therein appears a sentence first Enoch had never stated clearly according to this manner. The watchers descended to instruct the children of men. Look into Jubilees chapter 4. The author is recounting the genealogy from Adam through Seth, Enosh, Canaan, and Mahalalel. Then Jared was born. Right after Jared's name, the narrator pauses to explain that era's meaning. He writes, "For in his days, the angels of the Lord descended on the earth, those who are named the Watchers." Then the sentence continues, that they should instruct the children of men, and that they should do judgment and uprightness on the earth. This is Jubilees chapter 4, verse 18. Look closely at the difference. Within 1 Enoch chapter 6, we encounter the Watchers exactly when lust had already commenced. They saw the women. Shemihaza feared. The oath was established. Hermon became the place the rebellion began. Jubilees pulls the camera back further. Prior to the fall, those entities were called angels of the Lord. Their presence upon the ground initially linked with guiding humanity and maintaining judgment alongside uprightness. This is not yet the image of demons secretly invading the world. It is the image of heavenly beings bearing a positive function regarding humans. John C. Endres, when surveying the Watchers' tradition within Jubilees, emphasizes that the book's author continuously reworked Genesis stories by adding details the Torah did not supply, simultaneously receiving and modifying Watchers' traditions already circulating within the Enochic environment. Therefore, the story within Jubilees bears a vastly different tragic nuance. The destroyer of humanity once bore the mission of aiding humanity. Beings later imprisoned beneath the bowels of the earth once descended to the world bearing a purpose relating to righteousness. And precisely the distance between the initial mission and the final action generates the darkest portion of the book. But we additionally need to read the sentence truly accurately. Jubilees states the Watchers descended to instruct the children of men and to execute judgment and uprightness. The text has not yet listed here that they were assigned to teach humans hunting, farming, house building, or survival technologies. Specific details like that would be extended interpretations. The work focuses upon guiding humans within a correct order, and exactly that renders the subsequent betrayal more serious. Right following the sentence concerning the Watchers, Jubilees introduces Enoch. This is a highly intentional arrangement. The Watchers descended to guide humans. Enoch afterward became the first person among humanity described as learning writing knowledge and wisdom. He observed heavenly signs, recorded the order of the months, calculated the seasons of the year, recorded weeks, jubilees, and Sabbaths. Afterward, Enoch received visions concerning past and future, then testified against the Watchers themselves when they sinned against the daughters of humanity. This generates a highly noteworthy structure. Jubilees places the fallen heavenly teacher beside the faithful scribal sage. The Watchers received a position linking directly with humans, then betrayed it. Enoch received heavenly knowledge, recorded it, and utilized it as testimony. One side transformed the mission into lust. Enoch transformed knowledge into witness. That contrast likewise connects Jubilees directly with First Enoch. James Vanderkam points out the Jubilees author knew and utilized Enochic traditions. The way Jubilees recounts concerning Enoch the Watchers and heavenly tablets shows this is not yet a version completely independent from First Enoch. It is receiving then modifying a thought world that had existed previously. And the author modifies it right at the most important point. He hands the Watchers an initial mission. Afterward, he lets them destroy that exact mission using their own hands. Lust appears, and the teacher steps across the limit. Moving to chapter 5, the story shifts direction. Humanity multiplied increasingly. Daughters were born. The angels of God saw they were beautiful. Then the angels took the women they selected as wives. The children born became giants. Jubilees recounts this portion more briefly than First Enoch. Shemahazah nearly vanishes from the foreground. The oath upon Hermon is likewise not yet deployed at length. The author focuses upon moral and orderly consequences. Lawlessness spread across the ground. Humans grew corrupt. Animals were dragged into the chaos circle. Violence shattered the entire living world. And reaching chapter 7, Noah looks back at the pre-flood world, then determines very clearly where that process began. He taught his descendants to avoid fornication, impurity, and iniquity, afterward recalling that the Watchers themselves had gone against the law of their ordinances, pursued the daughters of humanity, and created the beginning of uncleanness. This phrase is highly noteworthy. The beginning of uncleanness. Within the way Jubilees recounts, the Watchers did not merely commit an individual sin. They opened an impurity chain. Beings inherently linked with judgment and uprightness now became the starting point of disorder. Their children continued pushing that process further. Jubilees. Chapter 7 even preserves a sequence of differing names for the giant generation giants, Naphil and Eljo. Within the Charles translation, then describes them slaughtering one another, killing humans, and spilling blood across the ground. This is where the fall within Jubilees bears special meaning. The Watcher's sin is a functional reversal. A heavenly guardian becomes a source of impurity. A guide becomes the falsifier of the guided. An entity linked with justice conversely begets a lineage whose ultimate nature is violence. Therefore, when the flood arrived, the Jubilees author viewed it like a reaction against a system having been ruined from multiple layers. The Watcher's sin opened. The giants amplified violence. Humans continued participating in the corruption. Then the entire world before Noah slid off the initial order. Yet, Jubilees additionally goes further than First Enoch at another point. After the Great Flood, everything seemingly was reset. The old world was wiped out. The giants no longer existed, and solely Noah's family remained to begin humanity anew. Yet, within the Book of Jubilees, the story does not stop there. Although the giants had vanished physically, their consequences still existed. The author states the souls born from that chaotic period did not vanish completely, but became a different existence form unclean spirits. These were no longer creatures possessing physical bodies. They were invisible entities, yet still capable of impacting humans, causing illness, leading humans astray, and pushing them to depart from God's order. Therefore, right after the flood, a new problem appeared. Noah saw his descendants begin being attacked by these invisible forces. He did not understand the cause clearly, but he saw the consequence clearly. Humans were once again dragged into chaos. During an anxious fit, Noah begged God to intervene and protect his lineage. Answering that prayer, Angels were dispatched down to control and arrest these souls, preventing them from freely causing harm upon the ground. But right at that moment, the story presented a new character, an entity standing at the boundary between order and chaos. His name is Mastema. Within the Book of Jubilees, he is not an ordinary angel, but an entity bearing a position almost like a counterweight to the heavenly order. The text calls him Chief of the Spirits, the one heading the evil spirits group remaining after the Great Flood, entities born from the consequences of the Watchers and their descendants. Mastema appears like a character possessing special authority within the divine system. He can present requests directly before God, and is even permitted to negotiate concerning the fate of the spirits. Within the story, he begged so a portion of these souls would not be annihilated completely, but retained under his control, aiming to continue testing and influencing humanity. He stated that if all were imprisoned, he would lose the tools to execute power over humans. Ultimately, a tenth was permitted to remain. 9/10 were brought down to the place of condemnation. This is one of the points Jubilees develops the consequences of the Watcher's story very strongly. The pre-flood disaster generated a post-flood legacy. Noah's new world still had to face evil spirits, but now they operated within a limited order. The majority were imprisoned. A small portion continued existing under Mastema's authority. And exactly within that context appeared a highly unusual detail. Noah was taught medicine. A heavenly messenger transmitted to him remedies to combat the illnesses the spirits caused. Noah recorded the remedies into a book, then handed those writings to Shem. Look at the story's structure. And this is likewise where scholars and theologians begin posing a larger question extending beyond the text. Why within a universe governed by a single God must both the order of good alongside the presence of evil exist? Several biblical researchers argue Jubilees is reflecting a very ancient thought model. The world is not innocent being fallen, but a system already designed with a boundary between order and chaos. Within this reading method, retaining a tenth of the spirits is not an error, but an intentional limitation form to test to maintain balance or to explain why evil still continued existing following the flood. Second Temple era Jewish theologians likewise once debated concerning this. Several traditions emphasized that even Mastema did not act outside God's permission, meaning evil is not an independent opposing force, but a controlled power within the divine system. From a modern religious philosophical perspective, this question expands even further. If God is almighty, why not completely eliminate evil? If evil exists, is it a necessary counterweight? So humans possess freedom of choice? Or can the universe solely operate when possessing both opposing poles, light and darkness, order and chaos, divine and demonic? Several scholars compare this structure alongside other ancient thought systems where the universe is always understood like a dynamic balance rather than an absolute pure state. Within that view, evil spirits are not simply God's enemies, but a portion of the world's operational mechanism after the initial order was shattered. And exactly because of that, the Jubilee story is not merely an expansion of Genesis. It becomes an effort to explain a larger paradox. If the universe was created by a sacred order, why right within that order does the possibility of rebellion always exist? During the Watchers era, knowledge transmission was ruined by beings deviating from the mission. After the flood, healing knowledge was bestowed within a permitted order. Knowledge therefore returned exactly to its function. Instead of expanding violence, it protected life. This is one of the reasons the Book of Jubilees deserves being placed right after the Book of the Watchers within our video. First, Enoch constructs the rebellion. Jubilees constructs a long history of consequences. The Watchers descended to earth. The mission collapsed. Giants appeared. The flood purified the world. Remaining spirits continued operating. Mastema received authority over a portion among them. Noah received medical knowledge to protect descendants. All reside within the exact same causal network. Yesidret Sharan. Why did Jubilees rewrite the story according to this manner? Biblical researcher James C. Vanderkam, Old Testament professor at the University of Notre Dame, calls Jubilees a rewritten scripture. The author took Genesis and Exodus as the framework, but he continuously inserted information the Torah currently does not recount. The names of the women, specific dates, laws concerning purity, the 364-day calendar, heavenly tablets, Enoch, watchers, Mastema. Those details transform Genesis into a history where law and order already existed vastly long before Moses. This is the important thing needing grasping to correctly understand the story concerning the Watchers. To Jubilees, God's law did not begin abruptly upon Mount Sinai. Sinai was merely the time Moses was shown an order inherently already recorded upon heavenly tablets. The patriarchs lived according to those principles beforehand. Holidays already possessed foundations since primeval times. The Sabbath resides within creation. Even the Watcher's sin is described like violating an ordinance intended for their very own existence type. That is the reason the initial mission detail matters so much. The Watchers did not step into a lawless world then accidentally discover lust. They existed within a cosmos already possessing order. They knew their positions. And Jubilees recounts the fall like the moment. A volitional entity independently placed personal lust higher than the bestowed function. John Endres commented that the way Jubilees modified the Watcher's tradition attaches tightly to the book's larger program. The author utilized the ancient story to speak concerning halakha boundaries and how a community must live within the correct order of God. Therefore, behind those giants and fallen angels is a highly practical message intended for Jewish readers in the 2nd century before Christ. Order exists because limits are respected. When beings possessing the highest power independently decide that laws intended for them can be stepped across, chaos spreads down the entire system. And that explains why Jubilees dedicates so much attention to calendar, Sabbath, purity, marriage, and covenant. They jointly revolve around one principle: keep the correct position within the established order. Shaita Qumran shows how highly esteemed this book once was. We need to pause at the Dead Sea Scrolls one additional time, because prior to the discoveries at Qumran, a skeptic could completely state, perhaps Jubilees is merely a late Ethiopian work. The Hebrew manuscripts shattered that hypothesis. The 2025 Oxford Research Encyclopedia Statistics, 14 copies of Jubilees within the Dead Sea Scrolls, all in Hebrew. That presence shows Jubilees was copied heavily within the Qumran environment. Vanderkam calls its presence level here a sign showing the work possessed apparent popularity at Qumran. Characteristic ideologies of Jubilees, especially the 364-day calendar, additionally bear very close relationships, alongside concerns appearing within sectarian scrolls. This is especially important regarding canon history. Outside the Bible today does not equate to irrelevant to ancient Judaism. Within the Second Temple world, the boundary among scripture, authoritative interpretation, and important religious works did not coincide completely with the canon sets closed multiple centuries later. Matthew Goff utilizes precisely 1st Enoch and Jubilees to illustrate this. Evidence from Qumran and early Christianity shows the corpus viewed by several ancient communities as possessing authority was considerably broader than the subsequent Bible. And this is the reason Ethiopia becomes important to the extent of being nearly inseparable from the story. Naharatur, Ethiopia retained a full version of Jubilees, while the majority of Western tradition no longer kept this text. If looking back at history, simply we will see two very different paths. In the West Europe, the Book of Jubilees gradually fell into oblivion. The Greek version ceased being copied, the Latin version remained merely as a few small passages. Although ancient Christian church fathers still once mentioned it, over time, Western churches no longer viewed it as part of the official Bible. Conversely, in Ethiopia, the story is completely different. The book bearing the name Mashafa Kufale remained retained, read and copied continuously across multiple centuries, nearly uninterruptedly. It continued living within a Christian tradition where Enoch was likewise preserved. And today, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church still lists both Jubilees and Enoch within its Old Testament. That is not yet evidence that Ethiopia kept an original Bible. while Rome intentionally destroyed it. Canon history is vastly more complex, but it proves a very important thing. Christianity never possessed solely a single identical transmission history everywhere. A book might lose position at Rome, yet still continue being scripture at Ethiopia. A Hebrew version might vanish from European libraries, yet its traces still lie beneath Qumran sand. A Ge'ez translation copied by African scribes across multiple centuries could become the sole bridge helping the modern world reread the entire text. And within Jubilees' case, that bridge existed long enough for us to read a sentence the Watchers' history within Genesis never recounted. The Watchers once descended to the world to guide humanity. Afterward, they betrayed exactly that role. This is exactly the central tragedy of Jubilees. Lust did not generate completely new beings. It deformed beings once possessing a function. Their power remained. Capability to access humans remained. But the purpose had altered. And when an entity possessing great power alters purpose, the consequence is always greater than the initial sin itself. The Watchers transitioned from guides into sources of impurity. Their children became engines of violence. Spirits of that generation prolonged chaos into the post-flood world. Mastema took advantage of the remainder. Then Noah had to receive a new knowledge system to protect humans against the very consequences of the past. Jubilees therefore supplements First Enoch with an extremely important thing. The fall did not begin from lacking understanding. It began when beings knowing the order clearly selected a different purpose for their power. And from here onwards, our story prepares to step into a completely different era. The Patriarch's era had passed. The flood had passed. The Watchers were condemned. But the invisible world was still filled with spirits bearing distinct names, functions, and harm-causing methods. Multiple centuries later, another ancient manuscript would place an earthly king standing directly before those entities. He did not flee them. He called each one forward, asked names, forced them to declare what they did to humans, then compelled them to reveal which angel possessed the right to defeat them. Within that king's hand was a ring bearing a seal bestowed from the heavenly realm, and the one holding it bore a name. Orthodox Bibles likewise know very well: Solomon. The Testament of Solomon. When the wise king confronted the invisible world. From the ancient traditions concerning the Watchers within the Book of Jubilees, the picture concerning the supernatural world gradually expands beyond what humans can see with the naked eye. What will humans do when confronting them directly? If a person can see a thing no one else can see, ask its name, know how it harms humans, know which angel can control it, then force it to work for a structure built by himself. Then at what position are humans standing within the universe's order? And have you ever wondered, or even once experienced a moment, causing you to believe you saw something not belonging to this world? A strange silhouette, an overly real dream, or merely the feeling someone is present? Perhaps you will say no. It is likewise possible you will recall a thing you never dared reveal to anyone. If you possess any related thought or experience, leave a comment beneath the video. And if finding this content worthy of reflection, do not forget to share for others to watch together. Whatever the answer is, exactly that vague feeling between believing and not believing brought humans since vastly long ago to stories like this. And from that intersection between curiosity and fear, we step into one of the strangest texts ever attached to the name of the most famous king within ancient Israelite tradition, the Testament of Solomon, or additionally called the Testament of Solomon. And right from the beginning, we need to separate two historical layers from one another. Solomon belongs to the world of the Hebrew Bible. The Testament of Solomon belongs to a literary world appearing vastly later. Modern scholars classify the Testament of Solomon into the pseudonymous text group, and Todd Klutz describes it like a late Roman pseudepigraphon, a pseudonymous work of the late Roman era, existing across multiple textual forms and multiple Greek manuscripts, wherein Solomon's life is recounted via dialogues alongside countless entities belonging to the demonic world. That means we are stepping into a story written under Solomon's name, rather than possessing evidence showing King Solomon himself sat writing this work. But what is more noteworthy than all is the fact the author intentionally chose exactly this name. He did not choose an anonymous or completely fictional character. He chose Solomon, the king famous within the Bible due to wisdom. The king described as the one begging God to bestow a discerning heart to govern the populace. The king attached to the construction of the Jerusalem temple. And more importantly than all, the Bible once described Solomon's intellect in a manner causing subsequent generations to be able to expand that image into the domain of understanding concerning mysterious things. Within 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 29 down to 34, Solomon is described as the one receiving outstanding wisdom and understanding concerning plants, beasts, birds, and multiple other knowledge domains. Jesse Rainbow, within a study published upon the Harvard Theological Review, notes that exactly the Solomon image within the Bible became the foundation for a vast tradition concerning Solomon the Mega Solomon, like an exorcist and possessing special knowledge concerning the supernatural world. That tradition developed strongly within early Christianity, then continued influencing subsequent magical traditions. And the Testament of Solomon is exactly one of the most important texts of that traditional stream. The King's Ring. The story begins not using a great battle, but using a highly ordinary chaos, the chaos causing an entire sacred structure to risk collapsing right from when it was unfinished. Solomon's temple was being built. Each stone block was hauled up. Each pillar was erected amidst the chiseling hammer sounds and the sweat of thousands of workers. But amidst that seemingly orderly labor rhythm, an abnormal thing began spreading like an invisible fissure. Workers began falling ill. No one understood why. Someone currently working then suddenly trembled, as if something was squeezing the breath inside the chest. Someone else was exhausted merely after a few hours, despite previously still being healthy. And then rumors spread there was something currently residing within the construction site. No one saw it, but everyone felt it, until a young worker became the clearest victim. He was tormented every night, not by humans, but by an invisible entity. He recounted that there was a dark shadow pressing upon his chest, causing him unable to breathe, unable to move, as if pulled out of his very own physical body. Every morning awakening, his body was exhausted, like having just endured a torture session prolonging multiple hours. That entity's name was gradually revealed within fearful whispers. Ornias. Solomon heard the news, and for the first time, the wisest king on earth did not confront an enemy of flesh and blood, but a thing no one could point out with their hands. He stood amidst the construction site looking at the workers gradually depleting and understood that if lacking a way to intervene, the temple would never be completed. He prayed, not a prayer-bearing ritual nature, but an urgent supplication, as if the entire kingdom were suspended upon an invisible thread. And then the thing no one expected occurred. No thunder and lightning, no sounds of war, merely a presence. Archangel Michael appeared, not like a vague human silhouette, but like an authority causing the surrounding space seemingly forced to fall silent. His presence required no words to affirm power. The very appearance was already in order. Michael looked at Solomon and handed him an object, a ring, tiny, yet bearing within it a seal not belonging to the human world. The ring was not merely metal, it resembled a key, a tool opening the door between the visible and invisible worlds. When Solomon put the ring on, he did not feel himself become strong according to the ordinary manner. He felt as if another order of reality had just opened before his eyes, and from that moment, everything changed. Ornias was no longer a vague feeling. It became a specific entity possessing a clear name. Solomon could call it out when needing, and when it appeared, he could directly confront and speak with it. Solomon stood within the construction site, raised the ring up, and for the first time within the story's history, the boundary between humans and the invisible world was shattered. Ornias appeared, not like a clear shape according to the manner humans are familiar with, but like a presence forced to reveal itself before the ring's power. Solomon did not panic. He began posing questions. What is your name? Where do you come from? In what manner do you harm humans? Who is the one possessing the right to subdue you? Each question resembled a hammer blow, smashing into the mystery layer concealing the invisible world. And Orneus, despite being a demonic entity, likewise could not remain silent. According to the Testament of Solomon, when Solomon summoned it, utilizing the ring possessing the angelic seal, Orneus was forced to answer within a completely subdued state. The text describes that Solomon placed the ring upon its chest, and immediately it was bound by the power arriving from the heavenly realm. Testament of Solomon, passages 1 down to 2. It was forced to answer. Each information layer was peeled apart, not utilizing physical torture, but utilizing a power type rendering concealment impossible. Within the text, Orneus was not merely forced to speak out its name, but additionally had to declare its nature and how it harmed humans. It admitted it sucked the vitality of young men and caused them to deplete gradually. Testament of Solomon, passages 2 down to 3. This is a highly characteristic motif of ancient Judeo-Christian demonic literature. The act of knowing the name equates to grasping control. Then, an even more terrifying thing occurred. Solomon did not merely stop at the act of knowing. He began issuing orders. Orneus was forced to submit, not because it wished to, but because the ring rendered resistance meaningless. Within the text, Orneus itself admitted it could not resist the ring, because the seal of the living God was carved upon it. Testament of Solomon, passage 2. Power here did not arrive from Solomon like an individual, but from the sacred symbol entrusted to him. From within Orneus's perspective, the world seemingly inverted. Humans, those inherently weak, finite, easily injured, now stood above it, not utilizing physical strength, but utilizing a power arriving from a higher order. And Orneus was not the sole individual. Following Orneus, Solomon continued summoning a series of other entities. The text lists multiple demons with names, functions, and how they harm Beelzebul, Asmodeus, and multiple other entities appeared successively within subsequent chapters. Testament of Solomon, passages 6 down to 20. Every time Solomon raised the ring up, a door opened anew. A name was called, a nature was revealed, a function was disclosed, a weakness was pointed out. Within the text structure, every entity was forced to answer 3 things: name, behavior, and the angel or power capable of subduing it. This is a highly clear catalog classification system of ancient demonology. Solomon did not battle according to the manner of a warrior. He resembled an investigator of the invisible world, yet every single question of his carried the weight of an unrefusable order. And then, the thing causing the entire story to become most symbolic occurred. The entities once causing chaos for humans now were forced to serve the exact same structure they once sabotaged. Within the Testament of Solomon, multiple demons were forced to participate within building the Jerusalem temple. They were commanded to haul stones, transport materials, and support the construction work under Solomon's authority. Testament of Solomon, passages 22 down to 23. They were forced to participate within building the temple. The things once causing humans exhaustion, illness, fear, now transformed into tools within the hands of a king. From a cinematic perspective, this is the moment the ring no longer remained merely an object. It became the center of the entire power, a symbol of order reversal. The invisible world was no longer the thing humans feared within the darkness, but the thing dragged out to the light and placed under judgment. And Solomon, standing amidst the temple construction site currently being built, was no longer merely an ordinary king. He resembled a person standing right at the boundary between 2 different worlds. One side is the human world where he is king, possesses the right to issue orders, control workers, organize structures, and govern the populace utilizing earthly power. The remaining side is the invisible world where angels, souls, and supernatural entities exist, and where power does not arrive from a throne or an army, but arrives from the bestowal of the heavenly realm. Therefore, Solomon's image at this time is described as seemingly holding both sides, one hand representing human power, while the other hand symbolizing the power bestowed from the heavenly realm, the thing permitting him to confront and control forces that ordinary people cannot see or touch. And every entity appearing afterward had to pass through the exact same question. Who are you, and what do you submit to? The invisible forces inherently sowing illness, lust, fear, and chaos now had to work for a king currently building a place worshiping God. This is one of the reasons the Testament of Solomon became an important document regarding the history of ancient demonology research. It does not simply recount that demons exist. It constructs an entire classification system. Each entity possesses a name, possesses a function, possesses a harm-causing method, possesses limits, possesses an opposing angel or power capable of subduing it. An academic study by Dennis Dooling concerning the Testament of Solomon emphasizes that one of the prominent characteristics of the work is the fact Solomon investigates the names of demonic forces and the names of angels possessing the capability to subdue them. This generates a worldview very different from the way modern humans usually envision demonic stories. Within the text, the invisible world is presented like a structured order, and humans can perceive a portion of that structure. Orneus, the first entity decoded. Orneus is one of the first characters appearing within the Testament of Solomon, and is likewise the gateway for the reader to step into Solomon's entire mystical power system. According to the legend within the text, Orneus is not merely a demon disrupting the temple construction labor, but is additionally an entity bearing energy parasitic nature. He sucks human vitality, especially young people, causing them to deplete gradually lacking clear cause. Precisely because of that, Orneus's appearance is viewed like a symbol for the invisible disasters ancient humans could not explain via medicine or natural science. When Solomon confronted Orneus, the key point did not lie within physical strength, but lay within the power bestowed via the magic ring. Within the Testament of Solomon tradition, this ring was bestowed upon Solomon by Archangel Michael following his prayer. Upon the ring exists a sacred seal, usually described as the seal of God. And precisely this seal permitted Solomon to order, summon, and bind supernatural entities. When Solomon raised the ring up, Orneus was not defeated according to the combat sense, but was power-locked, meaning stripped of the capability to act freely. From that moment, Orneus was no longer a harm-causer, but became a controlled tool forced to serve Solomon within tracking down and summoning other demons. This is a very important detail within the text's logic. Solomon's power did not arrive from himself, but arrived from a higher sacred order entrusted via the ring symbol. Following Orneus, the story expanded into a dialogue chain alongside a series of other entities. Each demon is not merely a character, but is an encoding of a disaster or lust type within the human world. Beelzebub is described like a high-ranking leader of the demons attached to the Lord of the Flies image within Judeo-Christian tradition, a symbol for impurity and decay. Asmodeus, conversely, bears a more complex legendary layer, inherently already appearing within the Book of Tobit, where he is attached to marriage sabotage and uncontrolled lust. Within the Testament of Solomon, Asmodeus is not merely a sex demon, but additionally a symbol of division and shattering family order. The important thing is, every entity, when summoned by Solomon, was forced to reveal identity function and the opposing angel capable of subduing it. This is a system bearing invisible world, mapping nature wherein everything possesses a name, possesses a position, and possesses limits. Precisely this structure causes the Testament of Solomon to become one of the most important texts within demonology research of the late antiquity era. Scholars such as Jesse Rainbow and Dennis Dooling have pointed out that the Solomon the Exorcist tradition did not appear abruptly, but was the result of a long process wherein Solomon's image within the Bible, especially his outstanding intellect within 1 Kings chapter 4, was expanded by subsequent generations into the supernatural domain. Solomon, from a wise king, became an archetype of the person capable of understanding and controlling the invisible world. This causes a detail to become highly noteworthy. The writer of the Testament of Solomon did not create a completely new character, but was restructuring a Solomon inherently already existing within the religious imagination of ancient Jewish and Christian people. The author merely pushed that image further according to a highly consistent logic of religious literature of this period. If Solomon is viewed as a person possessing outstanding intellect regarding understanding the natural world, then he can likewise understand the supernatural world. If Solomon possesses the capability to discern right and wrong within governing, then he can likewise discern the nature of invisible entities. If Solomon is the one building the temple, the center of God's presence, then he likewise possesses the right to confront forces seeking ways to sabotage that structure. From thence, the Testament of Solomon constructs a Solomon image, not merely as king, but as an intermediary between sacred order and supernatural chaos. A character whose power is not intrinsic magic, but the reflection of power arriving from God via the ring symbol. Precisely, this logic causes the entire story to become simultaneously mythological and theological. It does not merely recount concerning Solomon controlling demons, but additionally poses deeper questions concerning the origin of power, human limits, and the boundary between intellect and arrogance. But was Solomon real, or just a legendary figure? This is where we must be particularly careful. When speaking of Solomon, we are standing between two realms, history and biblical tradition. The Bible presents Solomon as the king who succeeded David and the builder of the Jerusalem temple. Archaeology, however, raises more difficult questions. Currently, there is not a single inscription that the academic community agrees upon as directly recording the name of Solomon, in the way we have for some other ancient Israelite figures. Even the scale of the kingdoms of David and Solomon remains a subject of debate. Archaeologists like Israel Finkelstein have proposed reconstructions of the scale of the Israelite state in the 10th century before Christ that differ significantly from traditional readings. Therefore, to say that archaeology has proven every detail about Solomon in the Bible would be overstepping the evidence. But that also does not mean that Solomon is merely an imaginary figure. A historical figure can exist and then be covered by many layers of legend by subsequent generations. That is exactly how we need to read Solomon. The Solomon of the 10th century before Christ and the Solomon of the Testament of Solomon are two different layers of imagery. On one hand is the king of ancient Israel. On the other hand is the Solomon reimagined by the religious imagination of many centuries later as a master with power over the invisible world. And it is precisely that gap that gives the text its historical value, because it shows us how ancient people remembered Solomon. From the wise king to Solomon the exorcist, the process of forming the image of Solomon the exorcist did not occur at a single moment, but is the result of many layers of tradition overlapping throughout centuries. One of the earliest and most important pieces of evidence comes from the Jewish historian Josephus, who lived in the 1st century after Christ. In the work Jewish Antiquities, specifically in Book 8 sections 42 through 49, Josephus recounts the story of a Jewish man named Eleazar. This man is described as having performed an exorcism ritual in the presence of the Emperor Vespasian and Roman officials. According to Josephus, Eleazar placed a ring containing a root believed to have been passed down by Solomon to the nose of the demon-possessed person while reciting incantations associated with the name of Solomon to force the evil spirit to leave the victim's body. The notable point is that Josephus does not present this as a distant mythical tale, but as an authentic event within contemporary Jewish tradition. This indicates that in the 1st century, there existed a widespread belief that Solomon was not only a wise king, but also someone who possessed special knowledge regarding the subjugation of invisible forces. The researcher Dennis Dooling, when analyzing this passage in Jewish Antiquities, viewed it as one of the important documents helping to trace the formation of the Solomon the Exorcist tradition. According to Dooling, the story of Eleazar reflects an intermediate stage where exorcism practices in Judaism had begun to be closely tied to the name of Solomon before being fully systematized in later texts, like the Testament of Solomon. This is particularly important because it shows that the Testament of Solomon did not appear in a historical vacuum. When this text was compiled during the period of late antiquity, the image of Solomon as a figure with power over demons already existed in the religious memory and ritual practices of the early Jewish and Christian communities. In other words, the author of the Testament of Solomon did not invent a new Solomon, but was exploiting a tradition that already had a prior foundation. He expanded the fragmented pieces of folk belief, exorcism practices, and oral tales to build them into a more complete system regarding Solomon's power over the demonic world. By the time of early Christianity and late antiquity, this image continued to be strongly developed. Solomon was no longer remembered merely as the king who built the Jerusalem temple or the writer of the Book of Proverbs, but gradually became a paradigm of power in the religious imagination. He was seen as the holder of special knowledge about the invisible world, possessing the ability to identify, name, and subdue supernatural entities. From there, a symbolic image gradually formed. Solomon was not just a historical king, but a figure standing at the boundary between human beings and the sacred world. In later traditions, he was associated with a ring of power, with the ability to control spirits, and with the role of establishing order amidst the chaos of the demonic world. And it is precisely in that long process of accumulation that Solomon ultimately became the familiar figure that the Testament of Solomon reflects: a wise king, a builder of the temple, a subject possessing special knowledge of the invisible world, and in the religious imagination of many centuries later, a Solomon holding a ring standing between humanity and supernatural forces. Church, when humanity stands before demons, let us look back at the central scene of the book. An invisible entity appears. Solomon asks for its name. It answers. He asks about its work. It confesses. He asks who has the power to subdue it. It must answer. Then an angelic name appears. This is not merely a symbolic dialogue. It is how the text affirms a core truth of faith. Every power in the invisible world has limits, and all must submit to the power coming from God. Because of this, knowing the name in the story is not simply knowledge, but the grasping of control. In ancient thought, a name is not just for calling, it is the essence. To know the name means to understand the essence. To understand the essence means to know how to confront it. And knowing how to confront it means no longer being overwhelmed by it. But the most important thing of all is, Solomon does not act by human strength alone, but by the power granted from heaven. The ring, the angel, and the command all emphasize one thing. True power does not lie within humanity, but in the one who bestows the power. This is the reason many researchers view the Testament of Solomon as an important source material for the history of demonology and ancient magic, rather than reading it as a direct record of a historical event. Todd Klutz places the work in the field of research on demonology, magic, and Solomon, while simultaneously emphasizing the pseudonymous characteristic of the text. But if we only stop at the academic perspective, we will miss the deeper layer of meaning that the religious tradition itself wishes to convey. Because behind the images of demons and angels, the text is reflecting a very real experience of humanity in all eras, the fear of things that cannot be controlled. Humanity always fears illness, fears disaster, fears invisible things beyond understanding. But in biblical belief, that fear is not the ending point. It is where faith begins. Therefore, the Testament of Solomon is not meant to prove that human beings can single-handedly subdue the invisible world. On the contrary, it emphasizes a clear order. Power belongs to God, and those who belong to Him are not abandoned to fear. This is a point of direct connection with the life of faith today. Modern humans still have fears: the fear of bad things happening, the fear of losing control, the fear of unseen things in the future. But in Christian belief, fear is not what dictates. The Bible repeatedly states a principle: God is with His people. That means that no matter how chaotic the world may be, no matter what inexplicable things a person may face, the believer does not stand alone. Thus, when reading stories about demons in ancient literature, the important thing is not to get caught up in fear, but to recognize the foundational message. All powers are under the supreme authority of God. Ancient people envisioned the invisible world as having order, having hierarchy, having angels and demons. But above all those layers, they still placed an unchanging principle: God is the supreme being. And it is exactly that belief that transforms fear into steadfastness. Not because the world no longer holds terrifying things, but because humanity no longer has to face it alone. Hot Char's Solomon could control demons, but the power was not inherently his. This is a point that many modern retellings easily distort. If one only looks at the ring, the audience might think the story is praising magical power. But if we delve deeper from the perspective of faith, this structure is not merely delegated authority, but also reflects a core theological principle. All true power does not originate from humanity, but always stems from God. The ring, although given by Michael, is only an intermediary medium. Michael is not the source of power, but the messenger transmitting the will of God. Solomon, even as a king, did not single-handedly create the ability to subjugate invisible entities. He could only receive it in the posture of a supplicant. This very act of supplicating carries a very deep theological meaning. It establishes an order in which humanity can only receive and cannot self-produce divine power. This is completely consistent with the image of Solomon in the Hebrew Bible. Before becoming a symbol of wisdom, he had prayed to God, asking for a discerning heart to govern his people. And the Bible emphasizes that God himself is the one who granted Solomon wisdom, understanding, and even the accompanying wealth. In other words, Solomon's wisdom was not a self-made achievement, but a grace coming from God. Therefore, when placing the Testament of Solomon in the light of faith, we see a consistent model. Humanity does not possess power as an intrinsic property. Humanity can only become the endowed one when standing in relationship with God. And even when power is bestowed, it always remains temporary and conditional. This highlights a very important theological boundary. Human power is always a reflection, never the source. The sole source of all power, according to biblical belief, is exactly God. Thus, Solomon is not someone who single-handedly masters the invisible world, but a person placed in a position of stewardship within the limits that God permits. And precisely because he once realized that in his early life, he was able to ask for wisdom instead of absolute power. Looking from this angle, the Testament of Solomon unintentionally emphasizes a profound theological paradox when humans forget the origin of power. They easily turn power into an instrument of control. But when humans remember that all things come from God, power becomes a responsibility rather than a possession. And that is the final boundary that this text, despite its mythical undertones, still unintentionally brings to light. Not between humanity and demons, but between the pride of humanity and humility before God. So what does faith in God bring? This is where the story of Solomon becomes closer to life than we think, because it is no longer speaking of an ancient king, but is touching upon a very familiar rule of humanity. In all eras, what we ask for at the beginning often reveals what we truly consider most important. The Bible describes Solomon beginning his reign with a very special request. He did not ask for a long life. He did not ask for wealth. He did not ask to destroy his enemies. He asked for wisdom to discern right and wrong and to govern God's people. Looking deeper, this is not just a humble choice, but a very subtle reversal. In the mindset of power, Solomon understood that the greatest problem for a ruler is not a lack of strength, but a lack of ability to discern how to use strength. In other words, he did not ask for more tools, but asked for a compass. That is the image of Solomon at his highest point. Power standing below responsibility, knowledge standing below the fear of God. But the very story of Solomon also shows a painful paradox. And this is what makes this character become very human rather than a perfect symbol. A person can possess great intellect and still can use power in the wrong direction. Because intellect helps us understand many things, but does not automatically protect us from the things we begin to crave. When a person is accustomed to understanding rightly, they might gradually believe that they also choose rightly. And that very gap between understanding and choosing is where mistakes begin. The Bible recounts that toward the end of his life, Solomon was swept up in choices that derailed his loyalty to God. That is not merely a historical or religious detail, but a very deep description of human psychology. The downward slide rarely happens in a single moment, but often starts from small things, gradually shifting the center of gravity in a person's heart. That is a very important point when placed alongside the Testament of Solomon, because later tradition turned Solomon into someone capable of subjugating the invisible world. But the Bible reminds the reader that the ability to control others is not synonymous with the ability to control oneself. In other words, outward-facing power always easily creates the illusion that the inside is also stable, but in reality, these two things do not go hand in hand at all. That is the great lesson. A person might know a great deal, might have power, might be feared and respected by others, might possess wealth, fame, and influence. But if a person's heart loses its direction, then everything that was once their foundation is no longer a foundation, but becomes an amplifier for that very loss of direction. And when that happens, the most dangerous thing is not that they grow weak, but that they remain strong yet no longer know where they are heading. When morality collapses, what will humanity open the door to what? This is also a point where it is necessary to read the Testament of Solomon along with the Book of Watchers and the Book of Jubilees. In the Book of Watchers, angels step down to the world and then use their power for the wrong purposes, abandoning God's order and dragging along the corruption of mankind. The consequence was not only spiritual chaos, but also a widespread decadence in society where humans began to be led by distorted knowledge and powers that did not belong to them. In Jubilees, the consequences of that rebellion extended after the Great Flood, as a reminder that sin does not disappear simply because time passes, but continues to leave traces in human history. Those who turn their backs on God do not step into freedom, but step into a prolonged chain of consequences, where chaos and deception continue to be reborn under many different forms. Arriving at the Testament of Solomon, humanity once again stands before the invisible world. But this time, the focus shifts from the fall of angels to human power over supernatural forces. And this is where the story becomes dangerous, because this entire tradition not only describes the existence of the invisible world, but also delineates a very clear boundary. Whoever steps out of obedience to God to seek power outside of him, that person is not going up, but is going down. The Bible and related traditions always place two parallel paths. On one side are those who trust in God, like Enoch, Noah, and Solomon. In his early life, they are granted wisdom, protected, and guided within the order of life. They do not seek power from the darkness, but seek understanding in the fear of God. And that itself brings stability, protection, and meaning to life. But on the other side are those who turn their backs on God, seeking knowledge and power from forbidden sources, from rebellious entities or systems that do not belong to the light. In these traditions, the consequences are always described according to the same motif: losing control, being deceived, being bound by the very thing they thought they were mastering. What initially looked like power ultimately becomes chains, and what they thought was higher knowledge leads them far away from true life. Therefore, the story of Solomon is not just about a king who could command invisible forces, but is a deeper warning. Humans can access knowledge, but if that knowledge is separated from God, it is no longer wisdom, but becomes a hazard. That is precisely the reason the story of Solomon carries a weight far exceeding rings, demons, and angels. It poses a question. If human beings are granted power, what will determine how they use that power? Obedience to God, or a curiosity that leads to a fall? What then do we believe in God for? Setting aside distant doctrines, the answer may lie precisely in the moment before Solomon became a legend. It is the image of a young king standing before the Creator, asking for only one thing: wisdom. He did not ask for an invincible army. He did not ask for the power to rule over invisible forces. He asked for eyes that could see through things, ears that could listen, and a sharp mind with which to steer his nation. From the original perspective of the Bible, faith is not a launching platform through which human beings reach for divine power. Faith, first and foremost, is the anchor that pulls us back to our proper place as human beings. I am only a human being. God is the one who gives the source of life. My power has limits. My knowledge has boundaries. And whatever privilege I receive comes with a contract of responsibility. That is the boundary Solomon was required to remember. It is also the very boundary that the fallen angels tore apart with their own hands. And ultimately, that is the brutal problem every generation of humanity must face. Because when the measure of morality becomes distorted, greed will immediately find 1,000 reasons to justify itself. When reverence disappears, power will devour its master and become the sole purpose. When the desire for control reaches beyond our grasp, human beings will stumble into the dark regions that biblical history has repeatedly marked with warning signs. If the ancient fragments concerning demons and angels have left us with any practical value at all, it is precisely this warning. The greater a person's power becomes, the more that person needs a moral compass greater than himself. Solomon may have held the sealing ring in his hand, but the only weapon he truly needed was wisdom. In the records of the Testament of Solomon, he could command every dark force to bow down at his feet. But the most truthful part of the Bible turns the question around with a razor-sharp question. Could that great king keep his own heart from betraying God? It was precisely this struggle between the light and the hidden darkness within him that transformed Solomon from a perfect symbol into one of the most complex and exposed human beings in the entire flow of biblical history. So what about the faith of humanity today? Be careful and look clearly at this boundary. Belief in a religion and true faith in God are two completely different concepts. Believing in religion fundamentally is the mental acknowledgement that a supreme being exists. People who hold this belief begin creating rules to regulate their own behavior. They do not hurl insults, they do not use violence, they do not harm their fellow human beings, and they try not to cross the boundaries of the law. Every Sunday morning, they enter a church. To them, behaving properly and attending church regularly are the clearest evidence that they are religious people. In their minds, believing in God simply means putting on the garment of a good person. They believe that as long as they keep themselves clean and do not commit evil, they will secure a ticket to heaven after they close their eyes for the final time and will have a fulfilling ending. Religion at this point serves like a life raft, keeping the spirit from drifting helplessly through life. Thus, religious belief stops at acknowledging the existence of God, clinging to hope for an afterlife, and making a few external changes in order to become a decent person. That is all it is. But is the God they worship truly present? Is he really speaking the truth? What does he desire from them? They have absolutely no idea. They piece together and shape an image of him based on their personal interpretations of biblical texts. That is the reality of religious belief. It causes people to become absorbed in pursuing outward behavioral appearances and searching for psychological refuge. But the path they are walking, the path of pursuing blessings and personal benefits, has never truly changed. Their mistaken ideas, expectations, and subjective imaginings about God remain exactly as they were. Their living roots, the goals and guiding principles they pursue in life, are in reality still rooted in the ideology of traditional culture and have never truly been shattered. That is the sad condition shared by all those who stop at religious belief. So what is genuine faith in God? And how does God himself define faith? At its core, it is absolute surrender to his supreme sovereignty. The most basic step is believing that he exists and holds all power. To believe in God is to desire to listen to his voice, to live, breathe, fulfill one's duty, and express a normal humanity exactly as he desires. Practically speaking, true faith means walking in his footsteps and living the life he has laid out. Looking at this, we can see that the goal and direction of those who possess genuine faith are completely opposite to those who merely follow a religion. What does this faith require? It requires the ability to fully take in the words of God, receive sharp truth that tears apart the corrupt dispositions within, courageously abandon worldly attachments to follow him, and devote oneself wholeheartedly to one's duty. This is not a matter of reward and punishment, but the boundary that determines whether they will be saved. Now that we understand the definition of faith, we must ask ourselves, how should this faith be lived and practiced? What does God require of those who follow Him? He does not need a dazzling moral exterior. He requires them to be genuine people longing for truth and longing to be transformed from within so that they can truly understand Him. As for outward manifestations, does God have any requirements? He requires seriousness, restraint, and a life that expresses normal humanity. Those who believe in God must maintain the basic dignity of a saint and live according to the complete nature of what it means to be human. So what does a person need in order to build that normal humanity? This is connected to countless truths that we are required to bring into the reality of our lives. Only by fully absorbing these truths can human beings restore their original humanity. If someone proudly claims to believe in God, but rejects practicing the truth, can that still be called faith? What harsh consequences will such superficiality lead to? To reach salvation, to truly bow down and worship God, human beings must bring His words into reality. All of this revolves around a single axis, living and acting according to the truth. Therefore, believing in God means examining ourselves through His lens and living in accordance with the requirements He has established. Only then can it be called a living faith. That is when we reach the very root of the matter, practicing the truth, following the Word of God, and living a life that resonates with His Word. That is the only truly correct path of life. Faith in God is not a theory. It determines the trajectory of human existence. That faith contains many profound truths, and those who choose to walk with Him are required to understand these truths. Remember this carefully. Merely changing the outer shell of one's behavior is extremely fragile and can never last. If deep within one's disposition and ego are not transformed sooner or later, the mask will fall away, and the person will reveal who they truly are. Because the roots of those good behaviors often come only from impulsiveness, from a momentary burst of enthusiasm when touched by the Holy Spirit. They can easily burst into fervor or display a fleeting act of kindness. As people have often concluded with a sigh, doing one good deed is easy. Spending an entire lifetime doing good deeds is the difficult part. Why are we powerless to preserve our goodness until the end of our lives? Even though the original nature of human beings was created to incline toward goodness, the merciless current of society and external temptations continually wear us down and cause us to become corrupted. It stains morality, injects selfishness into our bloodstream, and even more cruelly, it turns human beings into puppets manipulated by the darkness of Satan. For this very reason, God's work of salvation has never been about putting a glittering coat of behavior onto human beings. The ultimate purpose of His work is to break apart and recreate the entire inner disposition so that we can truly undergo a complete transformation and become a new life. The severe judgments, the blows of punishment, and the intense fires of refinement that God brings down upon humanity are all intended to refine the human disposition. He does this so that we may reach absolute submission and loyalty, and thereby learn how to worship Him with a normal state of mind. That is the supreme principle of God's work. A person behaving kindly does not mean that they are submitting to God, and it certainly does not mean that they are in harmony with Christ. Beautiful outward behaviors are often merely products of doctrine and empty enthusiasm. They do not grow from a genuine understanding of God. They are not rooted in truth, and they do not depend upon the guidance of the Holy Spirit. At times, certain extraordinary actions may be inspired by the Spirit, but that is not the expression of their life essence. They are still standing at the edge of truth, and their souls show no sign of transformation. No matter how perfect or beautiful a person's behavior may be, it cannot prove that they are obeying God or living according to the truth. Superficial changes can never represent the transformation of a life, and they absolutely cannot be regarded as evidence of a life that has reached God. And if you need living evidence of how the outward appearance of power can disguise the core of faith, then look at the very way history has distorted our wisest king. the legacy of Solomon the magician. Across the centuries, the legacy of this king continued to transform. From the worn and tattered parchment scrolls of ancient Jewish tradition, through the pen of the historian Josephus, flowing into the Testament of Solomon, and eventually taking deep root in the grimoires of the Middle Ages. A flesh and blood figure from history was reshaped by time into a symbol of forbidden knowledge. Researchers such as Jesse Rainbow have pointed out that the image of Solomon the Magus became one of the foundational building blocks for the entire system of European occultism that followed. It is a shadow stretching across the length of history, but it also exposes an extremely practical psychological pattern within humanity. The name Solomon carries absolute weight because it once belonged to a king recognized as a sage. Later generations merely added new layers of clothing onto that name. They transformed wisdom into esoteric knowledge. They transformed esoteric knowledge into forbidden power. And they transformed that power into a weapon for crushing the demonic world. And at the end of that path, Solomon emerges as a ruler standing precariously between humanity and the invisible realm. That is precisely the portrait the Testament of Solomon seeks to imprint upon our minds. A Solomon steeped in the mythology of late antiquity. A king surrounded by angels' demons, sealing rings and invocations, groaning through the darkness of night. But when we scrape away all those layers of accumulated mythology, the truth of the matter brings us back to a much sharper central question. When a human being is placed in possession of the gift of wisdom, what will he do with it? Power can force invisible forces to bow in submission, but only wisdom is strong enough to remind a great human being before whom he himself must bow. And that is the harshest paradox of the Testament of Solomon. The ancient book portrays a man capable of subduing demons with his bare hands. But the brutal history of the Bible reveals another truth. Solomon's bloodiest battlefield was never outside the walls of Jerusalem. It was inside his own chest. At this point, our journey must close the file on this wise king and move into a chapter of history that is stranger and far darker. We will leave behind the magnificent Temple of Jerusalem. We will put away Solomon's sealing ring and step directly into a real nightmare. A place where a fallen entity with a terrifying form tears through space to confront a man named Abraham. The name of that demon is Azazel. Apocalypse of Abraham, the encounter with Azazel. After the story of Solomon, we transition to another tale within ancient Jewish tradition, featuring a completely different context and perspective. This time, the central character is not a king building the Jerusalem temple. It is Abraham. In the Hebrew Bible, Abraham is one of the foundational figures of Israel's history of faith, situated within the context of the patriarchal age. Typically estimated by scholars to be around the beginning of the second millennium before Christ, although this dating is more of a reconstruction than a direct archaeological determination. According to the Book of Genesis, chapters 12 through 25, Abraham is described as leaving Ur of the Chaldeans, or Haran, according to some traditions, migrating to the land of Canaan, following the call of God, and establishing a covenant with Yahweh, in which he is promised land, descendants, and blessings. This figure became the foundation for the religious and national identity of ancient Israel, particularly in explaining the origins of the Israelites as the chosen people. But many centuries later, especially during the Second Temple period around the 5th century before Christ to the 1st century after Christ, the image of Abraham continued to be expanded in non-biblical Jewish traditions, including apocalyptic literature, pseudepigrapha, and midrashic interpretations. In this context, Abraham was no longer merely a historical religious patriarch, but became a character of cosmological symbolism, associated with visions of the heavenly realm, angels, and the order of the invisible world. Texts such as Jubilees, the Testament of Abraham, and especially the Apocalypse of Abraham, reflect this trend, as post-exilic Jewish authors sought to reinterpret patriarchal history in the light of new theological issues like evil fallen angels and the final judgment. During this developmental process, new questions began to emerge. no longer solely revolving around the historical journey of Abraham, but expanding into deeper cosmological and theological issues, such as the nature of the heavenly world, the role of intermediary angels, and the origin of the opposition between the divine order and rebellious forces. So, how did Abraham see God? How did he understand the invisible world? What happens when a human being is taken beyond the limits of the material world and witnesses firsthand what lies behind human history? One of the strangest answers appears in a text called the Apocalypse of Abraham. This is a Jewish apocalyptic work belonging to the group of pseudepigraphical texts composed in the first centuries after Christ. The text currently survives primarily through Old Slavonic manuscripts, while the original language is believed to possibly be Hebrew or Aramaic, with the probability of having gone through an intermediate Greek version before being translated into Slavonic. Scholars generally place the composition of the work around the 1st century to the early 2nd century after Christ. This creates a massive historical gap between the Abraham in biblical tradition and the text bearing his name. Abraham belongs to the patriarchal era in the Genesis narrative. Meanwhile, the actual author of the Apocalypse of Abraham lived many centuries later. Therefore, we are reading a work that recounts visions placed into the mouth of Abraham, rather than having evidence showing that Abraham himself wrote this text. But that very gap is what makes the work special. It shows us how later Jewish generations imagined Abraham heaven, angels the origins of evil, and the final judgment. And the story begins very differently from a battle between angels and demons. It begins with a young man living amidst a world of idols, Abraham, and the confrontation with the world of idols. The first part of the Apocalypse of Abraham, from chapter 1 to chapter 8, focuses on Abraham's youth and his process of abandoning idolatry. This structure is highly important. The author does not take Abraham straight to heaven. Before being allowed to see the invisible world, Abraham had to learn how to look at the visible world with a different eye. In the story, Abraham's father Terah is described as a maker and worshiper of idols. For Abraham, the issue began with a very simple question. If an object is made by human hands, how can that object become the source of power that humanity itself is seeking? That is the starting point for Abraham's journey. He observed the idols that people revered. He saw that they were created from matter. Then he witnessed that the objects humans placed in the position of gods could be damaged, broken, or lose their value. From there, Abraham began to seek a being that transcends what human beings can manufacture. This is a crucial concept of the entire work. Humans can make idols for themselves to worship, much like statues or images of deities. But humans cannot create the one who created them. This exact distinction becomes the foundation for all the visions and stories told afterward. Abraham departed from the world of idols and entered into a more direct relationship with God. After that, the narrative shifts to a completely different dimension. God called Abraham. An angel appeared. It was no longer the familiar sky of humanity, nor the landscape of the desert or the tents where Abraham used to live. Instead, space seemed bent out of the natural order. The light did not come from the sun, but from the very presence of a higher reality, where time appeared to stand still and every object possessed a transparent metaphysical quality. In that atmosphere, Abraham felt the vibration of a power surpassing all earthly experiences. The name of this angel was Yahuel, often transliterated as Jahuel in translations. Yahuel became Abraham's guide on his journey through the heavens. The text describes this angel with special power and associates him with the ineffable divine name. Some studies note that the figure of Yahuel shares similar characteristics with the tradition of Metatron in later Judaism. From here, the story is no longer about a man seeking God in the material world. Abraham began to become a witness, the man taken up to heaven. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, the angel Yahuel leads Abraham away from the human world and begins an ascending journey into the heavens. Abraham is lifted through each level of the sky, as if passing through multiple different layers of reality. Every heavenly sphere that Yahuel guides Abraham through acts like a series of ascent levels, in which each level unveils a deeper layer of reality in the celestial world. At the first level of the journey, Abraham is still at the boundary between the earthly realm and the supernatural space. Here, he begins to see symbolic images regarding the cosmic order and the operation of heavenly powers, but still at the level of visual preparation for deeper visions. When taken to the higher levels, the vision shifts to a form of history represented from the heavenly realm. Here, Abraham witnesses the foundational events of humanity, such as the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, followed by the tragedy of Cain killing Abel. However, these scenes are not recounted merely as memories of the past, but are presented as realities that continue to generate influence within the current flow of the world. The past, the present, and its consequences are placed within the same heavenly framework. Delving deeper into the subsequent higher levels, Abraham begins to clearly see the divided structure of humanity. The vision reveals two parallel paths of existence. On one side are those aligned with God's order, living in righteousness and obedience. On the other side are those who turn their backs on him, swept into deviation and moral chaos. This division is not only moral, but is also presented as a reality recorded in heaven, reflecting how history is shaped from a divine perspective. The further he advances in the journey, the more Abraham realizes that what he once knew about human history is merely the surface layer of a much vaster structure. Within that structure, every earthly event has a counterpart or reflection in the heavenly world, and conversely, decisions within the celestial order also directly affect the destiny of mankind. The crucial point of the entire vision lies here. The world above and the world below do not exist separately, but are presented as two sides of the same unified reality. One side is the archetype and original order. The other is the unfolding and manifestation in human history. It is the continuous interaction between these two spheres that creates the entire flow of the world, which Abraham is permitted to witness. Human sin is no longer viewed as isolated actions. Every choice has a place in a grander narrative of loyalty, betrayal, judgment, and redemption. That is also when Azazel appears. Azazel, the one standing in opposition. In many ancient traditions, the name Azazel appears as a detached puzzle piece of the same symbol, but each text redefines him in a different way, making this figure more complex than most demonological entities in ancient Jewish literature. In Leviticus chapter 16, Azazel is not described as a character with a distinct personality, but appears in the goat for Azazel ritual scapegoat ritual. A goat is chosen to bear the sins of the Israelite community and is sent into the wilderness for Azazel. Here, Azazel is generally understood in three ways. 1, a desolate location. 2, a destructive desert entity. Or 3, a symbol of impurity banished from the community. Regardless of the interpretation, Azazel in Leviticus is not a combatant figure, but the convergence point of the concept of sin being expelled from the holy order. Moving to the first Book of Enoch. Azazel, for the first time, takes on the clear form of a supernatural entity with free will. He is classified within the group of Watchers, angels who fell to earth. In chapters 8 through 10, Azazel is the one who teaches humanity forbidden arts, forging weapons of war using metals to create swords and shields, manipulative makeup and beautification, along with knowledge that leads to violence and societal corruption. Precisely because of this action, Azazel is viewed as one of the direct causes that made the world turn violent prior to the Great Flood. His figure here is not merely evil, but as the bringer of corrupted knowledge to humanity, turning understanding into an instrument that shatters the moral order. Reaching the apocalypse of Abraham, Azazel steps into an entirely different layer of meaning from the teacher of forbidden things. He becomes a cosmic counterweight to God's order. He is no longer just a solitary fallen angel, but is presented as a power with a wide sphere of influence tethered to the material world, temptation, and human fallibility. In this text, Azazel appears in various symbolic forms, sometimes bearing the guise of an unclean creature, sometimes as an invisible force clinging to the earthly realm. But the common thread is that he always represents the downward pull in opposition to Abraham's upward journey. The important point is that the Apocalypse of Abraham does not construct Azazel as an equal adversary to God. Instead, he is a force confined within the divine order, capable of tempting, misguiding, and polluting the human spirit, but unable to break the supreme authority of the Creator. Azazel's power is therefore more influential than dominant. He did not create the world, but he can distort how humanity lives within that world. From these three traditions, the figure of Azazel gradually forms a distinct developmental axis from the symbol of expelled sin Leviticus to the fallen angel bearing dangerous knowledge. First Enoch, and finally becoming the cosmic force of temptation, opposing revelation, Apocalypse of Abraham. This very transformation makes Azazel one of the most complex characters in ancient Jewish apocalyptic literature, representing not merely evil, but also the deeper question regarding the boundaries between knowledge freedom and human corruption. The confrontation between Abraham and Azazel. In the process of preparing for a sacrificial ritual, Abraham is guided by the angel Yahweh. Azazel appears like a sudden draft of cold air sweeping through the sacred space. There are no footsteps, no warning signs, only the sensation of the atmosphere being warped, as if the light around the altar is pulled askew in an invisible breath. Then, from the void above, a shadow plummets down, not a bird in the natural sense, but something bearing the shape of a bird, yet twisted by impurity, its wings seemingly draped in thick darkness, every flap slicing through the light, like a blade tearing through incense smoke. It dives straight toward the offerings being prepared, as if drawn by the scent of the ritual of the blood of the incomplete consecration. The space around Abraham seems to contract in that moment. He is still standing amidst the ceremony dedicated to God, his hands still holding the solemnity of the act of worship, but that presence has skewed the entire order of the moment, as if a stain has just fallen onto the center of a white cloth stretched out in the light. Azazel appears to break his concentration and pull him away from the holy place. But Abraham does not comply. Yahweh speaks out against Azazel and commands him to leave. In the introduction to the classic translation by G.H. Box, Azazel is described as a fallen angel and the tempter of mankind. In the sacrificial scene, he appears in the form of an unclean bird and attempts to make Abraham abandon the sanctuary. This is a scene vastly different from the imagery often seen in modern films. There is no sword fight between two supernatural warriors, nor is there a prolonged physical battle. Instead, the entire conflict occurs at the level of choice and willpower. Azazel seeks to impact Abraham directly, trying to drag him off the path that God is leading him on by disrupting his focus and shaking his obedience to the divine command. Meanwhile, Yahuel immediately steps up as a protector, establishing a boundary between Abraham and Azazel's influence, keeping him in a state of purity and in the exact position the vision requires. From here, Abraham is no longer in a simple situation that can be avoided or delayed, but is placed at a point of profoundly internal decision. He must discern between the calling that leads upward and the drag that pulls downward, between the angel's guidance and the temptation coming from Azazel. And ultimately, instead of being swept away by Azazel's influence, Abraham holds fast to his obedience, continuing to walk, following Yahweh's guidance on the predestined journey. This is the pivotal point of the entire book. The force of darkness is never placed on equal footing with God. Azazel can only tempt, oppose, and influence humanity, but he possesses no ultimate deciding power. The final judgment still belongs to God. Did Azazel once have a place in heaven? One of the most intriguing details of the text lies in the words Yahuel speaks to Azazel. Yahuel mentions a heavenly garment that once belonged to Azazel, but has now been reserved for Abraham. This detail makes the figure of Azazel far more complex. He is not merely described as a demon emerging from the shadows. The text evokes a past in which Azazel once held a position belonging to the heavenly realm before being cast out of that status. A recent study on Azazel in the Apocalypse of Abraham also emphasizes that chapter 14 of the text presents a unique tradition regarding Azazel's power and his position as the primary adversary in the apocalyptic narrative. This brings the story back to a familiar motif in the traditions of fallen angels. A being created within a higher order can turn its back on that order. And when that happens, the issue is no longer simply good and evil in a battle. It becomes a question of freedom, loyalty, and the consequences of misdirected power. What did Abraham see behind the veil? After the confrontation with Azazel, Abraham's journey continues. Yahweh takes him higher. Abraham steps into a world described by light blazing like fire, yet not consuming. The text states that he was borne up in the wind of heaven and was surrounded by a glory that made him tremble to the point of having to bow his face down, because he could not bear that presence. Apocalypse of Abraham, chapters 15 and 16. In that scene, angels appear as fiery beings, unceasingly praising the Most High, and their voices blend into a single sound, like mighty waters or the sustained roar of thunder. Abraham not only sees them, but also feels their movement as a part of the sky itself. At the center of the vision is the throne of God, surrounded by an immeasurable light. The text emphasizes that Abraham is not permitted to look directly at the form of the one seated on the throne, but only sees the overarching glory like a fire without beginning and without end. Chapter 17. Surrounding the throne are celestial creatures described as entities with multiple faces and many wings in constant motion, yet never leaving their positions, as if the entire universe were breathing in a single rhythm. In that setting, Abraham realizes that every idol humans ever created on earth, statues of wood, stone, or metal, all become small and hollow. The text lays out this contrast very clearly. What his ancestors worshipped were merely products of human hands, while what he is witnessing cannot be created by any hand. At the beginning of the work, Abraham once stood amidst inanimate idols, observing how humans attributed to them powers they did not possess. But here, in the heavenly vision, he confronts a completely different reality, not something constructed, but the origin of all existence. On one side is an object crafted by man, silent and confined within its form. On the other is a being whom mankind cannot craft, cannot fully describe, and cannot contain in any image. One begins from human hands, from earth and finite matter. The other begins from revelation, from a reality transcending all capacity for creation. And Abraham stands between those two worlds, as someone permitted to see, yet not permitted to possess. Brought in, yet not assimilated. Informed, yet not allowed to fully grasp what he has seen. From heaven, Abraham looks down upon human history. This is the part that makes the Apocalypse of Abraham no longer simply a story about Azazel, but turns it into a much larger narrative. In the vision, Abraham is lifted up to see the whole world as if looking down from on high. He sees land rivers and sees mountains, all living creatures, and even the Garden of Eden, considered the first garden of humanity. Not only that, he also sees mankind divided into many different groups, each group following a different path of life. Some living righteously, some living wrongly, some turning their backs on what is right. Afterward, God explains to Abraham why evil and wickedness appear in the world and the consequences they bring throughout human history. During this, Abraham raises a very direct and also very human question. If God is the being of absolute power, then why does he still allow Azazel to exist and to influence humanity? This question, in fact, does not belong solely to Abraham, but is one of the hardest questions that people in all eras have pondered. Why does evil still exist in life? Why do humans know what is wrong, yet still choose the wrong? Why does a world governed by God still contain suffering, injustice, and brokenness? In the Apocalypse of Abraham, the answer is given in a fairly clear direction. Evil does not always coerce humans, but is largely tied to the free choice of humans themselves. Humanity still must bear responsibility for its choices. Azazel contempt, but Azazel is not God. He does not make decisions on behalf of mankind. And that itself is what makes the story more thought-provoking. Azazel is not an equal adversary to God. This is a point that needs to be kept extremely clear when telling this story. If one views the Apocalypse of Abraham as a fantasy film, the audience can easily imagine a war between two forces of equal power. But the theological structure of the text does not go in that direction. God still maintains the absolute supreme position. Yahweh is present as an angel serving heavenly power, executing commands within the divine order. Abraham is the human being who is guided, whose eyes are open to behold realities transcending the visible world. Meanwhile, Azazel is the adversary standing on the side of rebellion. Therefore, Azazel's power is always placed within an order much larger than himself. This very fact makes the figure of Azazel terrifying in a very different way. He does not need to be constructed as a second god counterbalancing the Most High. He only needs to be present as an entity that knows how to slither into the weakest crevices of humanity, and from there, lure them away from the righteous path. Abraham and the portrait of the human soul. The deeper he goes into the vision, the more Abraham sees history in a way that ordinary humans cannot see. What happens on earth is juxtaposed with what happens in the heavenly world. Idolatry, betrayal, judgment, the destruction of the temple, the emergence of a redemptive figure in the end times, all are placed within the same grand picture. The text is closely linked by scholars to the event of the Jerusalem temple's destruction in the year 70 after Christ, because the apocalyptic portion of the work seems to reflect the memory of that catastrophe. Therefore, the Apocalypse of Abraham is not merely a story recreating the era of Abraham in the distant past. It essentially reflects how a Jewish community living in the context of the post-First Temple or after the event of the Second Temple being destroyed reinterpreted their own history through the figure of the patriarch. In their collective memory, political upheavals are no longer isolated events, but become signs of a divine order operating behind history. They had experienced the fall of the Jerusalem temple, the religious center and symbol of God's presence among the nation. They had witnessed empires successively dominating their land from Babylon and Persia to Greece and Rome, with every new power bringing along a different form of imposition on religious and social life. They had also lived in a prolonged state of instability where national identity was tested by exile, resettlement, and successive crises of faith. In that context, placing those historical experiences into the mouth of Abraham is not just a literary device, but also a way of restructuring collective memory. Abraham becomes the intermediary figure, the one believed to have foreseen what the subsequent community would have to endure. Through him, traumatic events no longer carry a random nature, but are interpreted as part of a broader divine plan, where human history is reread in the light of vision and revelation. Through the character of Abraham, the author can raise a larger question. If humans were to view the entirety of history from the perspective of heaven, how would they understand their own catastrophes? The true battle is not between two demons. This is why I think the Azazel section should be told differently, unlike ordinary stories about demons. The focus of the Apocalypse of Abraham is not on humans hunting or fighting demons. Abraham is also not given a ring or the power to become a sorcerer. Instead, he is taken up to heaven to see things beyond the ordinary world. He is guided to understand what he is witnessing, and ultimately he realizes his true position before God. This is very different from the story of Solomon. Solomon in the Testament of Solomon is constructed as a man with the authority to command invisible entities. Abraham in the Apocalypse of Abraham, conversely, is constructed as someone brought into the invisible world to learn how to view history from God's side. One confronts the invisible force with bestowed authority. The other confronts the invisible force through revelation. And both stories cycle back to the same issue. Where does humanity stand before the power of God? And where does Azazel stand? At the very end, Azazel is not placed on an equal level with God, nor is he the one who decides Abraham's final fate. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, Azazel is presented as an entity opposed to God's order, tethered to temptation, corruption, and whatever drags humanity away from the righteous path. In a symbolic scene to the text, Abraham is shown a dichotomous division. The portion belonging to Abraham is placed in the high place, while the portion associated with Azazel is placed in the low place. This is how the work articulates the difference in position and destiny between the two sides, rather than describing two equal powers. This establishes a boundary throughout the vision. Abraham is permitted to recognize Azazel, to hear about him, and to observe how he influences humanity as well as the flow of history. But Abraham does not belong to Azazel, and Azazel also has no right to dictate Abraham's fate. Thus, the figure of Azazel in the book is both terrifying and limited. Evil can appear, temptation can appear. A fallen entity can seek to lure mankind off God's path. But within the structure of the text, the right of judgment and the ultimate authority always belong to God. Abraham saw the world that humanity does not see, and this is exactly the most important connecting point with the story we just left behind. Solomon was transformed by later tradition into someone who could name and control invisible entities. Abraham, conversely, became someone taken up to see a portion of the invisible world with his own eyes. Both traditions originate from a very ancient belief: the world in which mankind is living is not the entirety of reality. There remains an invisible layer behind it. However, the Apocalypse of Abraham emphasizes an additional, very important, and much clearer point. The fact that humans can see the invisible world does not mean they can master it. Abraham knew Azazel existed, but that did not grant him the power to control Azazel. Abraham was allowed to see angels, but he did not become an angel. Abraham was taken up to heaven, but he did not become God. Despite experiencing all those visions, Abraham was still only a human being, a human standing before the Creator. And right here, the story circles back to the issue we raised from Solomon. Like someone today curious about fortune-telling or online future-predicting apps, initially just wanting to know a little more for fun, but the more they look, the easier it is to be swept into the feeling that they are grasping something beyond the reach of others. Just like when someone gains access to insider information within a company, they might begin to feel they understand more than others. And from there births the desire to control or push further than the original boundary. Humanity can crave power, wishing to touch things beyond the sight of others and be drawn in by the mysteries of the invisible world. But what is even more worth pondering lies in a different question. After seeing all those things, what will humans do with the understanding they have received? Abraham left the world of idols to seek God. He faced Azazel but did not follow Azazel. He was taken up to heaven but did not usurp God's position. He saw the secrets of history, but ultimately still stood in the position of a human being listening. And perhaps that is precisely why the Apocalypse of Abraham remains worth reading after thousands of years. Because beneath the layers of angels, evil spirits, heavenly realms, and surreal visions, the book still asks a very human question. If one day we were allowed to see what the naked eye cannot see, would that make us wiser, or would it only make us more arrogant? And when Abraham saw Azazel, he was not taught how to become Azazel. He was taught how to recognize Azazel. Those two things are entirely different, because understanding evil is one thing. Handing one's heart over to it is another matter entirely. And in the world of the Apocalypse of Abraham, that boundary is exactly where human destiny is decided. The Second Book of Enoch, the journey through 10 heavens. If First Enoch brings the reader before the secrets of the angelic world through visions of judgment, Second Enoch opens up an entirely different direction. Here, Enoch does not stand on the outside listening to tales of what is happening in heaven. He is taken up there, one level at a time, one door at a time. Every region of the universe opens up before his eyes like a colossal structure that humans on Earth have never had the ability to see. That is precisely the point that makes Second Enoch also known as Slavonic Enoch, one of the most unique texts in the Enochic literary tradition. It does not simply expand the story of Enoch by adding a few new visions. It constructs an entire cosmic map, a universe divided into many heavens, each with its own function, its own inhabitants, angels in charge of specific duties and areas that even Enoch must be guided through under the protection of celestial messengers. The more important point lies here. Second Enoch does not focus on the origins of the rebellion of the Watchers, like the Book of the Watchers section in First Enoch. This time, the story places Enoch in the position of someone permitted to look right through the structure of creation. He begins from the earth, then he is taken up to the heavens, and the higher he goes, the more apparent the distance between the human world and the celestial order becomes. This is a journey about the structure of the universe, about the hierarchy of angels, about judgment, and ultimately about a much larger question. If humanity only sees a very small fraction of reality, then what exists beyond the limits of human eyes? Enoch, the chosen one. The story begins in a context vastly different from the commonly seen image of Enoch. According to ancient Jewish tradition, he lived in a very early period of humanity, when the world was still close to the post-creation era, before nations were distinctly formed, and before religious law was systematized, as in the time of Moses. That was an era when the memory of God still retained a direct nature not yet obscured by complex religious institutions, and humanity was understood to still be living in a moral space, close to the source where good and evil had not yet been separated into fixed philosophical systems or laws. In that context, Enoch was not just an ordinary individual. He is described as the one who walked with God, an expression indicating that his life was deeply intertwined with righteousness and a special moral acuity. He did not live as someone isolated from his community, yet he was perceived by the community as someone with an extraordinary inner life. Rigorous, upright, and always oriented towards holiness in behavior as well as in thought. Enoch's morality was not merely the observance of external rules, but a continuous state of living in the awareness of God's presence in every action. For this reason, when it is said that he had a family, had a life on earth, had a place in his community, it does not mean he was detached from the human world, but on the contrary, he lived fully in that world with a lifestyle shaped by faith. Enoch's faith was not a doctrinal system written into text, but a complete entrustment to the righteous order of God, where righteousness is never forgotten, and wickedness ultimately must face judgment. But then, within the flow of that sacred time, an event occurred, described not as a random occurrence, but as an intersection between two orders, the order of human life and the order of the celestial world. Two angels appeared. Their appearance was not understood as a symbolic or metaphorical phenomenon, but as a direct intervention into Enoch's personal history occurring at a predestined moment when his life had reached a level of moral and spiritual maturity sufficient to receive revelation. They came to Enoch at a special moment and asked him to go with them. This did not carry a nuance of coercion in the earthly sense, but was more like an invitation bearing a divine command, where Enoch's personal will was placed in dialogue with the will of God. Within his moral tradition, obedience was not a loss of freedom, but the highest form of freedom, freedom from the blindness of limited understanding and from the constraints of the visible world. It is worth noting that Enoch was not taken straight before the throne of God. The journey took place step by step, as if he himself had to be prepared to see layers of reality that ordinary humans could not endure or comprehend. This preparation was not only visionary in nature, but also moral and spiritual. Every heaven he passed through was an expansion of awareness, while simultaneously serving as a test of his ability to maintain his humility, reverence, and faith. The angels became guides, but not only in the sense of spatial guidance. They acted as intermediaries of the sacred order, helping Enoch pass through each level of reality without being shattered by the overwhelming power and celestial glory. Throughout this entire journey, Enoch's faith was not replaced by knowledge, but was purified through knowledge. His morality was not erased by the supernatural experience, but was placed into a vaster context where every action, every order, and every living being oriented towards a single center, which is God. They led Enoch out of the familiar world, crossing the boundaries of the earth and entering a space where the rules of human life began to lose their ordinary meaning. From here, Second Enoch transitions from the story of a man living on earth into the story of a human being guided through a structured universe. And that very structure is what makes the text different. The first heaven, from very early on, humanity has always dreamed of leaving the earth surpassing the limits of their eyes and setting foot in a place where the sky is no longer a distant veil, but becomes a navigable space. That longing is not merely pure imagination, but a desire to touch the order behind what continually appears every day above their heads. In Second Enoch, the first heaven is the starting point for that journey, but it is not the place where Enoch accesses the deepest secrets of the universe. It is like the first door opening for humanity to step out of their familiar world and realize that what they call the sky is actually just a very small part of a much vaster structure. Here, Enoch begins to see areas related to celestial bodies and the entities managing their operations, as if the entire sky that humans observe from the ground is merely the surface of an ordered system being coordinated by forces far beyond ordinary lived experience. There, the universe is a strictly ordered system. Angels assume specific functions, while celestial bodies operate according to fixed laws. Everything has a clear place in that structure, and Enoch as a human being merely stands on the outside to observe that entire order. This creates a fundamental difference compared to the Book of the Watchers. In First Enoch, a major focus lies on the story of the violation of the celestial order and its consequences. In Second Enoch, the reader is brought into that very order to observe it from the inside. The second heaven, entities awaiting judgment. As Enoch continues to be taken up, the scene becomes darker, not only in a visual sense, but also in the sense of a truth being exposed behind the celestial order are entities that once held high status, but have now been stripped of their power. He sees entities in the state of captivity, and in some textual traditions related to Enoch, they are described as those who were once on high, but are now brought low for overstepping the limits assigned to them. In First Enoch, specifically in the Book of the Watchers, this is expressed more clearly through the judgment pronounced upon the Watchers. You were in heaven, but the secrets of heaven were not for you, a sentence emphasizing that knowledge and power are not things that can be seized without paying a price. They bear terrifying forms and are awaiting a time of judgment, not like free creatures in chaos, but like entities placed in a state of awaiting the execution of a sentence. This very waiting creates a strong contrast. The power that once made them rise above humanity now holds no value before the supreme order. This is one of the most important images in Second Enoch because it shows that the text is building a very clear concept of the invisible world. There is no neutral zone for betrayal, and no power stands outside of judgment. The celestial realm does not only contain angels serving God, but also includes areas designated for entities that once violated the limits set for them. In an intertextual reading with a broader Enochic tradition, this is exactly the focal point of cosmic justice. Even those who belong to heaven do not escape the law of judgment when they rebel. Enoch does not witness a battle between two equal forces because throughout this entire system, the concept of an absolute counterweight to the supreme authority does not exist. He sees an order in which rebellious entities have been placed in a position awaiting a verdict, acting as a reminder that falling does not lead to freedom, but leads to confinement. This creates a very different nuance compared to modern imaginations of the rebellion of the angels. Here, betrayal is not romanticized into an eternal confrontation, but is presented as a deviation with an inevitable consequence. The darkness in Second Enoch is not described as an autonomous power, but as a state placed under control. Even entities that once held heavenly status do not escape this principle. Power does not come with immunity, and rebellion does not lead to victory, but leads to deprivation. Therefore, this image is not only a scene of captivity, but also a theological statement in Enoch's order. Every breach of trust against God carries a proportionate price, and even spirits, or celestial bodies, when stepping beyond their assigned limits, will be placed under judgment. That is an idea that will continue to appear as Enoch delves deeper into the heavens, acting as an overarching principle. No power stands outside the justice of the Most High, and no betrayal fails to lead to a final reckoning. The third heaven, where heaven and hell are placed side by side. Reaching the third heaven, Enoch is led into a space so expansive that the human sense of direction nearly vanishes. The atmosphere here no longer feels heavenly in the familiar sense, but resembles an intermediate realm where light itself possesses life spreading into thin layers like mist, yet brilliant enough not to cause glare. Before his eyes, the landscape is divided into two distinct regions, yet without physical boundaries like walls or gates. One side is described as the land of blessing, where the light becomes soothing and stable, as if the space itself is breathing in a rhythm of peace. There, Enoch feels a stillness so deep that there is no trace of conflict or unrest. Every movement is slow, harmonious, and carries the sensation that time is no longer pressing, but simply passing in a state of eternal rest. The souls of the righteous are envisioned as being present in a state of lightness unburdened by physical bodies, and the entire space feels as if it is enveloped by a continuous, uninterrupted comfort. In opposition to that on the other side, the space becomes thick and heavier, as if light is being sucked back into itself. The area reserved for those under judgment is not described with imagery of fire or specific punishments, but with a sense of imbalance. Everything here carries an invisible tension, as if the space itself is being pulled out of its original order. The entities placed in this area no longer move in a harmonious rhythm, but exist in a state of being held back, restricted as if time here no longer flows, but merely repeats itself in a closed loop. This image is particularly important because Second Enoch is transforming the concept of reward and punishment into a part of the universe's own structure. Instead of being events that occur after humans die, they are presented as zones of existence already preset within the order of the heavens, where the nature of human life is reflected directly into the very space to which they belong. Good and evil are not merely two moral choices in human life. They have consequences extending into the afterlife. Humans may live a short life on earth, but their actions are placed within a much grander order. For Enoch, the most terrifying thing does not lie in the bizarre scene before his eyes. It lies in the fact that he begins to realize human life holds a place within a system of judgment that the naked eye absolutely cannot see. The fourth heaven, the sun, the moon, and the machine of time. From here, Second Enoch transitions into a very specific domain, religious astronomy. Enoch is shown how the sun and the moon operate. These celestial bodies that usually appear every day in the sky to humanity suddenly become part of a system managed by angels. This recalls the highly developed astronomical systems of the ancient Sumerians, where the sky was not merely a space for observation, but a sacred map, read like a language of the gods. The Sumerians had early on constructed planetary observation cycles, complex lunisolar calendars, and highly mathematical cosmological models, to the point that many modern scholars are still astounded by their precision and systematic nature. However, the truth is that such knowledge, no matter how sophisticated, was still placed within a religious interpretive framework. Celestial bodies did not simply move, but acted according to the will of the gods, reflecting the order of high heaven down to earth. This is a point that needs to be distinguished very clearly from First Enoch. First Enoch also contains massive sections on astronomy, specifically in the astronomical book, where Enoch receives knowledge about calendars, the movements of the sun, the moon, and the gates of heaven. Second Enoch does not simply copy that entire section. It brings Enoch into a more multi-layered universe in which astronomical knowledge becomes a part of the journey through the heavens. Humans look up at the sky and see a sunrise and then set. Enoch is taken to a place where those movements become part of an ordered operation. Time in the world of the text is no longer something humans merely experience. It is a mechanism being maintained. The fifth heaven angels awaiting their duties. The fifth heaven brings Enoch closer to the celestial creatures. He sees angels belonging to a special group. They appear as a massive army stretching all the way to the limits of vision, standing in row upon row, stacked upon one another in an almost absolute order. Their bodies do not bear the heaviness of flesh, but seem as if woven from condensed light, at once transparent and radiant, causing the surrounding space to seem warped by their presence. Some angels radiate a cold white light like pure ice, while others bear a warm golden hue like fire yet do not burn. And there are forms so ethereal that only when they move slightly does Enoch discern the outline of wings or cloaks. They are in a strange state, waiting. There is no scene of fierce combat. There is no new rebellion. Instead, there is a sensation of a colossal army existing in wait before a higher order. Their posture is motionless, but not at all rigid. It is the stillness of entities that have transcended the concept of fatigue or time. Their wings, if they can be called such, are not feathered structures, as in human imagination, but resemble bands of energy, expanding and then retracting to the invisible breath of the universe. Their faces are mostly obscured by light or by a mist-like veil, but when Enoch catches a glimpse, he senses an absolute solemnity, not of emotion, but of duty. This imagery helps Second Enoch construct a different conception of angels. Angels are not merely winged creatures appearing to save humans during perilous times. In the world of the text, they belong to a system of offices. Each group has a role, each heaven has duties, and Enoch is gradually being introduced to an organized celestial society. The sixth heaven, where the celestial order is exposed. Reaching the sixth heaven, the scale of the invisible world becomes clearer. Enoch encounters angels with duties related to managing the operations of the world, and it is noteworthy that they do not appear as vague symbolic entities, but as true officials within an ordered operating system. They oversee domains that humans generally consider belonging to nature or fate, the progression of time, the changing of the seasons, the movement of celestial bodies, and even events in human life. Originally understood as destiny, the angels record every action of mankind as if the entirety of history is being preserved in a set of celestial ledgers that never err. Supervisory angels observe the world from higher vantage points, ensuring that order is maintained and nothing oversteps established boundaries. Managing angels directly coordinate the operational mechanisms of the universe. From natural laws to processes that humanity cannot intervene in or alter. In that description, the heavenly realm no longer bears the guise of an abstract space, but closely resembles a colossal, strictly organized court where power is distributed according to specific offices, ranks, and duties. Each angel does not merely exist, but works within a continuously operating system, making the entire universe resemble an ordered machine controlled from above. This explains why Second Enoch is important in the historical development of angelological thought. It does not only ask, what is an angel? It begins to envision a more complex question. What do angels do within the structure of the universe? When the question changes, the entire celestial world changes accordingly. Angels become the executors of order. And Enoch, the higher he ascends, the more clearly he sees the gap between the position of humanity and the position of the entities serving before God. The seventh heaven, Enoch, stands before the majesty of the heavens. The seventh heaven is a turning point in Enoch's entire journey, because this is where the boundary between the created world and the center of divine power becomes clearer than ever. According to Second Enoch, when Enoch is led up to this heaven by the angels, he no longer stands before natural phenomena or angels executing duties as in the lower heavens. Instead, he steps into a space resembling a divine palace, where the order of the entire universe is coordinated from the center. The text describes that Enoch is taken to a place where the light is unbearable, where there is no darkness, and where angels stand in reverent silence before the glory of God. Second Enoch, chapters 20 through 22, traditional Slavonic version. The light here is not natural light, but a form of sacred presence, blanketing the entire space, forcing Enoch to bow down and cover his face because he cannot look directly into it. It is precisely in that context that Enoch begins to realize the absolute disparity between humanity and the divine order. He is no longer an observer from afar, but becomes a witness standing right at the threshold of the center of power. The text emphasizes that the angels in this heaven no longer bear the image of messengers or task executors as in the lower levels, but are entities standing in a state of eternal service, unceasingly praising and maintaining order before the throne of glory. This creates a feeling that is both solemn and overwhelming, because every movement is absolute devoid of randomness or chaos. At this moment, the question regarding the limits of human cognition is raised directly. Second Enoch does not articulate this as an abstract theory, but as a lived experience. Enoch told before the magnitude of what he saw, for no human words could describe that glory. Second Enoch, chapter 21. It is important to note that Enoch was not taken up to this heaven because he possessed power superior to the angels. The text emphasizes that he was guided by the will of the Most High, meaning the entire journey stems not from human capability, but from divine permission. Because of this, being allowed to see becomes a theological privilege. It is not a rightful ownership of knowledge, but a temporary permission to witness an order to which humanity does not inherently belong. And within that very privilege, Second Enoch also sets a clear boundary. The closer one gets to the center of glory, the more humanity realizes that its capacity to understand cannot keep pace with what it is witnessing. The eighth and ninth heavens, the final steps before the celestial center. As Enoch advances to the higher heavens, his experience can no longer be described as passing through a space in the ordinary sense. It is in this moment that the text begins to shift its focus from the external landscape to how Enoch feels and is transformed by what he witnesses. The heavens no longer resemble physical locations in the usual sense. For Enoch, they are like layers of existence stacked upon each other, where each layer differs not only in form, but also in the essence of being. He does not merely behold a new scene. It is as if his very cognitive capacity is being recalibrated to endure the level of presence of higher realities. Thus, the dominant feeling from Enoch's perspective is not curiosity, but a form of sacred overwhelmingness. Each time he is led up to a new heaven, he does not just see more, but realizes that what he previously considered the entire world is actually just a tiny fraction, even a mere outer shell of a much deeper structure. They become levels of divine reality. Here, Enoch no longer stands in the role of an observer outside the system, but gradually becomes someone enveloped by that system. What he sees no longer follows the familiar logic of the human world. The space, the order, and the presence of celestial entities seem to operate by a rule that he can only perceive through reverence rather than complete understanding. There, what Enoch sees transcends the human world, transcends the celestial bodies, and proceeds to entities belonging to a higher level in the order of creation. But what is more important is how he internally reacts to this transcendence. He no longer tries to explain it in the manner of humans on Earth, but gradually shifts into a state of passive reception, where his cognition is stretched to adapt to what is being revealed. Every step makes Enoch understand something more, but it is not the kind of cumulative understanding like ordinary knowledge. It is a form of understanding accompanied by the shrinking of the ego. The higher he ascends, the more fragile the sense of humanity's position becomes, as if the entirety of mankind is merely a tiny speck situated on the fringes of a colossal cosmic structure that he previously never had the capacity to envision. The universe that humanity sees is merely the outermost part of a vaster reality. And from Enoch's perspective, that outermost part no longer holds the central significance humans usually assume, but is akin to the thinnest, most easily penetrated layer of a multi-tiered system, where every layer has its own laws and inhabitants. And if the lower heavens already contain things humans cannot explain, then the higher heavens make the gap between human knowledge and divine knowledge all the more glaring. For Enoch, this gap is not just an issue of information, but a gap in the essence of existence. The higher he goes, the more he realizes that there are realities not designed for humans to understand in the conventional sense, but which can only be witnessed within one's own limitations. The 10th heaven, where Enoch is brought before God, Finally, Enoch is brought to the 10th heaven. This is the highest point of the journey, the most sacred place in the entire 10-heaven structure, where everything belonging to creation stops before an insurmountable boundary. Here he is led before the presence of God, the one seated in indescribable glory, where light is no longer light, in the sense humans understand, and all languages become powerless before absolute majesty. It is noteworthy that the entire journey through the 9 preceding heavens is actually preparing for this moment. Enoch has seen nature from the outside. He has seen captive entities. He has seen heaven and the place of judgment. He has seen angels carrying out their duties. He has seen the higher levels of creation. But all of those things are still merely creation. The final heaven brings him near the Creator, where everything pertaining to the cosmic order settles down before an absolute presence. And this is precisely the point where Second Enoch constructs a very clear hierarchy. Angels have power. Angels have knowledge. Angels have duties. But angels are still creations. A human being can be elevated. Enoch can be granted knowledge, but that does not mean he becomes God. The gap between creation and the Creator continues to exist unblurred, even in the most sacred place where the glory and majestic form of the Lord are fully revealed. This is exactly the theological foundation lying beneath the entire journey. Enoch is not only permitted to see he is transformed. After being taken through the heavens, Enoch does not return to earth as a person completely the same as before. The angels taught him. He was given knowledge. He was instructed regarding the secrets of the universe and the celestial order. But the most important thing that happened to Enoch was not how many more secrets he knew. It was that he understood his own position. Humanity can receive knowledge from the heavens, but that knowledge does not turn a human into the master of the heavens. In Second Enoch, Enoch becomes an intermediary transmitting the knowledge bestowed upon him. He is assigned the responsibility to pass it down to future generations. This is a vastly different point compared to the secret hunter image in modern retellings. Enoch does not step into the heavens to steal power. He is brought in there to learn to witness and to pass on. From Enoch to Metatron, a special layer of tradition. Right here, another detail that makes Second Enoch important in the history of Enochic tradition appears. Within the text, Enoch undergoes a special transformation. He is altered in appearance and status, becoming a figure with a higher position in the celestial world. This detail later becomes one of the crucial foundations for the development of the Enoch-Metatron tradition in mystical Judaism. However, a very clear boundary must be kept. Second Enoch does not simply declare in the manner of Third Enoch that Enoch is Metatron. The tradition of Enoch becoming Metatron develops much more distinctly in later mystical Jewish texts, particularly Third Enoch or Sefer Hekhalot. Therefore, when placing Second Enoch into the history of thought, we are looking at a link in the developmental process of the Enoch figure. An Enoch who was initially a righteous man in Genesis, then became a man receiving revelations about the heavens in the Enochic traditions. Then, in the later mystical Jewish traditions, that figure continued to be elevated into a special celestial character. That is a developmental process stretching across many centuries. So where does Second Enoch truly differ from First Enoch? This is a question that needs a clear answer, because if we merge the two texts into a single story about Enoch and angels, we will lose the distinct value of each work. First, Enoch is an anthology composed of many parts formed through different stages. In it, the Book of the Watchers focuses heavily on the angels who violated order, the judgment meant for them, the giants, and the decadence of the world prior to the Great Flood. Second Enoch goes in a different direction. It constructs a cosmic journey. Instead of taking this reader back to the origins of the rebellion, the text takes Enoch right through a system consisting of 10 heavens. Instead of centering on the Watchers, Second Enoch devotes much space to angelology, astronomy, cosmic structure, angelic duties, judgment, and the position of humanity before the Creator. That difference is highly important. If First Enoch is like an investigative file on the violation of celestial order, then Second Enoch is like an exploratory expedition right through the system of the universe itself. One text asks what happens when order is broken. The other text wants the reader to see just how vast that order is. And because of this, simply calling Second Enoch a sequel to First Enoch would be misleading. A book lost in history. There is a particular paradox surrounding Second Enoch. Today, this text is often known under the name Slavonic Enoch, because it was preserved primarily through Slavonic manuscripts. But the original language of the work's composition remains an issue debated by scholars. Many studies place its origins in the Jewish environment of the Second Temple period or the subsequent era, with various dates being proposed. The issue is further complicated because the text no longer exists in a complete Hebrew or Greek original. What we have comes mainly from the Slavonic manuscript tradition passed down over many centuries. This makes Second Enoch a very fascinating case in textual history. A work can originate from an ancient Jewish environment, yet be preserved through a later linguistic and manuscript tradition. Thus, every time we read Second Enoch, we must distinguish between the time the text might have been composed and the time the copies we currently still hold were created. That is precisely the reason scholars must work with a linguistics manuscript's textual structure and parallels with other Jewish works to determine its history. The angels in Second Enoch are not merely winged creatures. One of the notable contributions of Second Enoch lies in how it expands the angelic world. Angels in the text have offices. There are guiding angels. There are supervising angels. There are angels executing duties related to the heavens. There are entities playing roles in recording and maintaining order. This reveals a crucial shift in ancient religious imagination. The celestial realm is increasingly envisioned as an organized kingdom. God is the Most High. Beneath him are levels of celestial entities. Each level has a duty. Each duty serves a greater order. To modern humans, this image might look like a mythological world. But to the communities receiving the Enochic traditions, it carries a different meaning. It answers a very practical question. If God rules over all creation, then what are the invisible forces doing in that world? Second Enoch answers by constructing an organized heaven, where power does not operate in chaos, but lies within a hierarchical system. The most terrifying thing is not the 10 heavens. After all that Enoch has seen, the most thought-provoking thing does not lie in the number of heavens. It lies in the position of humanity. Humans live on a small planet. We look up at the sky and often think we are seeing the entire universe. Second Enoch shatters that feeling with an entirely different image. What the human eye sees is merely the outermost part. Above it, there are other levels. Within those levels are entities that humans cannot access with ordinary senses. And transcending above it all is still the Creator. If we read this text as a historical document of religious imagination, we see an ancient community trying to answer the question regarding humanity's place in the universe. If we read it as a theological text, the message is even deeper. The more knowledge expands, the more humanity must be aware of its own limits. Enoch is permitted to see more than others, but the more he sees, the more he realizes he is still a creation. That is precisely the paradox lying at the center of Second Enoch. Humanity can be elevated very high thanks to bestowed knowledge, but that knowledge does not grant humanity the right to become the creator. And when placing Second Enoch next to the story of Solomon we just followed, the connection becomes particularly clear. Solomon in the Testament of Solomon is envisioned by later tradition as a king capable of identifying and subjugating invisible forces. Enoch in Second Enoch stands in a different position. He is permitted to step into the invisible world to observe its order. Both touch upon the same question: what will humans do when granted the power to see things beyond their normal limits? The answer of Second Enoch is very different from tales of magic. Enoch is not taught how to become the master of the heavens. He is taught how to understand his place within it. And perhaps right here is where we truly see the deepest value of the book. Because after 10 heavens, after countless angels, after places of captivity, celestial bodies, and secrets ordinary humans have never seen, Enoch still has to return to a simple truth. Humanity can be told a great deal about the invisible world, but supreme power still belongs to God. And the closer one gets to the secrets of creation, the more humanity needs humility to remember that they are still only a part of that creation. After following these 5 ancient texts, we are left with a picture far more complicated than the simple image of angels falling from heaven. The Book of Watchers gave us the story of rebellion and the watchers who crossed a boundary they were never meant to cross. The Testament of Solomon transformed that ancient fear into a strange world of names. Demons, angels, seals, and invisible powers placed under divine authority. The Apocalypse of Abraham took us even deeper into visions of heaven, judgment Azazel, and the spiritual struggles surrounding humanity. Second Enoch opened another layer of the ancient imagination, presenting a vast celestial structure in which the heavens were divided into distinct realms, each revealing something about creation, judgment angels, and the destiny of the human soul. And together, these writings reveal something important about the people who preserved them. They were trying to understand a world larger than what the human eye could see. They asked where evil came from. They wondered why humanity suffers. They questioned what exists beyond the visible heavens. And above all, they wrestled with one enduring question: where does human freedom end? And where does divine authority begin? Some of these books were preserved outside the biblical canon. Some survived only through particular religious traditions and manuscript traditions. Some were copied, translated, interpreted, and reinterpreted across centuries. Their stories should therefore be approached carefully with a clear distinction between scripture, ancient tradition, later religious imagination, and modern speculation. But even when a text is not part of the biblical canon, it can still tell us something valuable about the people who read it. Feared its stories, debated its ideas, and used its images to make sense of the invisible world. Perhaps that is the most haunting part of this entire journey. The ancient writers were not simply asking whether fallen angels existed. They were asking what happens when beings created with power turn away from the order that gave them that power. And that question reaches far beyond angels. It reaches humanity, because Solomon's story reminds us that wisdom can be received and still be misused. The Watchers remind us that knowledge without obedience can become destructive. Azazel represents the terrifying image of rebellion standing before judgment. And the visions of Enoch remind us that within these ancient traditions, the universe was never imagined as a place without order. There was a boundary, there was a judgment, and above every angel, every demon, every king, and every human ambition stood God. Perhaps that is why these forgotten texts have survived for so many centuries. Not because every story within them must be accepted as historical fact, but because they continue to confront the same questions that humanity has carried from one generation to another. What happens when power is separated from responsibility? What happens when knowledge outruns wisdom? And what happens when humanity begins searching for supernatural power while forgetting the one who stands above it? Tonight, as this journey comes to an end, you can leave those questions unanswered. Perhaps that is where the most interesting part begins. Thank you for staying with us through this journey into the hidden literature surrounding the fallen angels. If you found this story worth remembering, consider sharing it with someone who enjoys ancient history, biblical mysteries, and the forgotten texts that existed around the edges of Scripture. And if you have your own interpretation of the Watchers, Azazel, Enoch, Solomon, or these ancient traditions, leave it in the comments. There are still many manuscripts waiting to be opened, many stories waiting to be understood, and perhaps somewhere within those forgotten pages, another ancient mystery is still waiting for us.
Until then, rest well. And remember, sometimes the oldest questions are the ones that never truly disappear.